Hello dear viewers, support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it, and also make sure you comment your thought. Now let's start the video. Lady Stark stomped away, with a downcast Edmure and an apologetic Brynden in her wake. Mother is in a fine mood today, Arya said. She is worried about all of us, not just Sansa. I'm sending her back to River Run with the Kingslayer, Robb said. What about Lord Edmure? What about the Freys? Jon said. I cannot spare any men now. I have neither the time nor desire to bargain with Lord Frey, Robb said. Are you going to punish the Freys for deserting? Arya asked. Robb can't punish Lord Walder. The Freys are sworn to House Tully. It was Lord Edmure that Walder insulted, Jon said to his confused sister. Ser Riemann and his sons are cravens. They would not have betrayed the Tullys without Walder Frey's approval. Walder Frey will deny it, of course. He is a disgusting old man, but he has no lack of cunning. If the Tyrells and Lannisters win, he can claim that he held half his troops back and strike a better deal with the throne. If we win, Sir Steffron and Perwyn will be fighting for us. Either way, the Freys come out on top, Rose said. That is not cunning. That is deceitful, Arya said. It is both, sister, Jon said. It is Edmure's right, an obligation to punish the Freys. But the Tullys have only a small army. Without his bannermen, he would be outnumbered in any conflict with Lord Walder. Robb said. Robb can send Stark men to support Edmure, but we need every sword and spear for the coming battle, Jon said. Robb nodded his head. We are ready now. I will ride the cavalry down. Jon will take the infantry on a forced march. The boats have been dispatched. We will move swiftly south. You don't plan to wait at all, Arya said. I have seen the Tyrell army in motion. They move slowly, so we will move quickly. They expect time to set up their forces. We will not give that to them. We will march and force them to react. The battle will occur where we choose, Robb said. And where is that? Arya said. Robb pointed to a place on the map, 30 leagues to the south, on the shores of the Great Lake. The God's Eye. That is where we will fight the Tyrells. The bells rang in the Tyrell camp early that morning. Sir Garland rushed out of the tent with his shield and sword. To his squire's dismay, he only wore a mail cloth about the head and gauntlets and vambraces to protect his forearms. Sir Garland preferred no armor, rather than hastily fitted pieces that would be far more cumbersome than full plate. He looked about cautiously. There were no dire wolves present, or fires burning. The Starks might have attacked, but any damage was not great. Sir Garland met with other leaders in the central pavilion. Sir Brand and the giant Gregor Clegane represented Lord Tywin, but the leaders were predominantly Richmond, Hightower, Fossaway, Crane, Oakhart, and Merryweather. Lord Randall Tarley was in charge of both armies, and he was barking orders to his two unfortunate sons. Sir Garland commanded a large force of Tyrell cavalry, but the strongest bannerman was Sir Grey, Lord Hightower. Sir Baylor, what was the attack this morning? Garland asked the handsome heir of Old Town. They think it was the Blackfish. He raided with 100 men, and destroyed several supply wagons before retreating. Baylor said, These attacks are only flies biting at our heels. Vance and Piper men attacked my spears yesterday, and we repelled them without a single loss. Orton Merryweather said, It is true. When my knights came to help, they had already fled. Sir Parman Crane said. These Northmen seem poorly equipped to fight against the Reach, Lord Oakhart observed. You have not fought the Northmen, Sir Adam Arbran said. Those raiders are rivermen. The Blackfish may be a seasoned warrior, but he is not a Stark. They are much more devious, and will attack where we least expect. That is why we will strike first. Lord Taylor raised his hand, clutching a note in a meaty hand. Garland realized that the fat son named Samwell had just handed a short missive to Tarley. Do you have news, Lord Randall? Madbrand asked. We have a spy in the northern camp. They have already marched 50 miles down from Harrenhal on the western shore of the lake, Tarsley said. The wolves have won battles through trickery. At the Whispering Wood, they lured Jaime Lannister into an ambush. They broke the siege at River Run by attacking in the early morning. They attacked Oxcross with surprise. They took the Golden Tooth with treachery, and they built defenses and traps on the other side of the Trident. These tricks won't work on us. Why not? Does your spy know what they intend? Marbrand said. Paxley shook his head dismissively. The battle plan is simple enough. We have 40,000 men, twice their number. Our knights and foot soldiers will break through the center of the northern lines and overpower the two halves. After the infantry is defeated, we can chase their cavalry away. There will be no ambushes, no surprise tactics. We will attack on flat ground where our charge will destroy their forces. Are you not worried about northern cunning? Jon Snow asked. 5,000 men dead would be a heavy loss for the Reach. For the North, 5,000 dead would be a disaster. We can afford to wear them down, and when they are broken into smaller groups, they will be easy to flank. The North does not have enough men, and that will be their downfall, Taxley said. We have heard that the North has more men, that knights from the Vale and the Lightning Lord have joined them. The Brotherhood without banners now fight for the Starks, and Septons and other men pledge to the faith. Adam Marbrand said. Taxley scoffed. A few hundred men here or there, bandits, deserters, small folk, and who cares about these self-proclaimed sparrows? When have kings and high lords ever had to dance to the twittering of sparrows? The Reachmen in the tent applauded Lord Tyrell for his bold plan of attack. Sir Adam Marbrand seemed less convinced, and the freakishly large Gregor Clegane had no expression on his ugly and surly face. Gerlin had spent 2 days with Jon Snow at River Run. He was more familiar with Robb Stark, but Snow struck him as nobody's fool. On the way to the Riverlands, Owen warned Gerlin that his friend was clever as a fox. Tarly expected the Starks to fall to the combined Lannister and Tyrell army, and saw Jon Snow and Robb Stark as two green boys who would break before an experienced commander. Hadn't Lord Tywin made that same mistake? House Tyrell's sigil was a huntsman with a bow. Hornhill's words were first in battle, but the Starks were wolves. Who would win between a hunter and a pack of dire wolves? Jon Snow woke up to the loud snoring of Jorah Mormont. She drooled a bit in her sleep, her crooked teeth and winsome smile visible under the furs. She was no fair maiden, actually Jorah was no maiden at all, but she was eager and unburdened. When Jon worried about battle and the looming threat of death, she laughed. The stranger comes when he comes, she said. But before we die, we must live. She pinned him down with heavy teats, keelless hands and thick thighs. At least, she had not threatened to use her morning star. Jon smiled at the slumbering she-bear. Starks had made happy marriages with Mormonts in the past. But you are not a wolf, the voices whispered. You are the blood of a dragon, and dragons do not plant trees. No, they did not. His namesake least of all. Prince Daemon preferred to play at war than be a devoted paramour. His first marriage simply lacked any affection. The later two marriages were bloodier affairs. Lady Lyanna died in childbirth, trying to birth a son. Rhaenyra might have been beautiful once, but she was petulant, proud, and grasping. Hardly a good foundation for marriage. War was easier than love. The rogue prince was good at war, and so was Jon. He left the tent and breathed in the cool morning air. There was no wind, and the sun was low in the sky over the God's Eye. Besides the guards on night patrol, only a few squires and boys had woken. Jon opened a cage and a raven took wing, flying west. He sat and waited, until the bird reached the enemy camp. The Tyrells had deliberately kept to flat, open land. To avoid any ambushes, for the last 20 miles, they would march east to meet the northern army, camped on the western shore of the God's Eye. There were two obvious ways of attack. The Reach could use their superior numbers and widen the line, beyond the point a smaller force could match. Then they could attack the wings and try to envelop the northern army. There were two problems with that approach. First, the wings would be vulnerable to harrying from Robb's experienced cavalry. Second, the lake protected their back. It would be bloody and costly, but the north had a strong defensive position. The Tyrells were less than 10 miles away. Jon saw through the raven's eyes a huge host of tent and thousands of horses. There were a few banners for the Westermen, but dozens for the Reach. The Reachmen had not widened the line. In fact, they had formed large, narrow columns, with less frontage, but great depth. The entire army was spread over less than a mile and densely packed. There was light cavalry and infantry on the wings, to shield the massive central attack force, rows of spears and swords, and most importantly, the knights with lances. Lord Tyrell meant to cut through the northern infantry with one brutal charge, a flying wedge that would penetrate deeply and break the enemy formation. Lord Randall knew his history. That was what the blacks had done at the God's Eye, forcing the greens into the water to drown. How far are they? Robb's voice broke into Jon's thoughts. Less than 10 miles. They mean to attack our center. Tarly knows our infantry will break. No doubt, Lord Bolton told him, or spies for the lions or roses. Robb said. We will be ready, Jon said simply. The two brothers sat in silence, thinking of the battle to come. What of the engagements in the last few days? The Blackfish, Mark Piper, Carol Vance, and Martin Rivers have been raiding, but they retreat immediately. No casualties on our side, Robb said. Jon nodded. The Mummer's farce would make the Reachmen overconfident. Southern knights and lords enjoyed boasts, and such skirmishes would give them ample fuel. Yesterday, the Blackfish harassed some water-bearers who wandered outside their main camp. So the horses will not have enough water, at least for a day, Robb said. They will not die of thirst, but any advantage, no matter how small, is good, Jon said. Do you think Tyrell attacks this morning? Robb said. Most likely. He waits until Bolton tells him our plans. The Leech Lord is cunning, and we do not know how he sends messages. If his messenger is fast, the Reach will attack today. If not, tomorrow. They think it is easy to put us to flight, Jon said. Your plan is dangerous, more so even than the Red Fork, Robb sighed. Jon shrugged. We cannot ask others to fight if we are not willing to lead. Time to fight or die, Robb said. Or perhaps both, Jon thought. Northmen and Riverlords were crammed tight into Robb's tent. Dried meat, dried fish, and bread were laid out on the table along with a crude map. Robb added to the lines on the parchment for the lake, with circles on the north and south for the short hills overlooking the valley. The cavalry will be placed in these two spots. The Blackfish and Sieur Martin will lead the Rivermen on our left wing. I will hold the right wing with the Greychon, Karstarks, and Umbers. Sir Robar and the Valemen will ride with me. Robb turned to Rose Bolton. My lord, I would give you a place of great importance. You will hold the very front. Bolton's pale, cold eyes gazed at both brothers. Jon wiped any emotions from his face. I appreciate the confidence, but where will the other forces be deployed? Jon stepped forward and marked several spots on the map for a mixture of units. They were behind and either to the left or right, forming two diagonals, with the Bolton men were at the peak. Next came the Dustins and Risewells. Interspersed in the crescent were pikemen and mixed forces. The Mormonts held the flanks. After he finished marking the inverted V, Jon spoke. This is an echelon formation. Lord Bolton's men will face the Tyrells. Our new recruits will be behind him, as will the Glovers, the Manderleys, and the Mountain clans. The center will be extremely thin, Rose Bolton said in a soft whisper. We have no choice. Our formation must be flexible to offset the advantage they have in men. If they attempt to attack your sides and flanks, then other units can reinforce you, Jon said. Do you not think you can hold the front, Lord Bolton? Robb asked. I accept the honor of the position. I intend to repay you for your trust, Rosierd. But where do you plan to be, Master Snow? I will be behind you, my lord, closer to the shore. After all, I am no fighter, Jon said. Lord Stark, the scouts report that the enemy host is enormous, that there are dozens and dozens of the banners. Might they have received reinforcements? The Redford Knight asked. Robb smiled. Sir Mitchell, who are the best knights in the Seven Kingdoms? The Knights of the Vale, my lord, the young man said with certainty. And we have the knights. They may have numbers, but the Reach does not have Sir Mechel Redford. Our strength and speed will win the day, Robb said. Sir Mitchell blushed from the praise and laughter spread through the ranks of the Northmen. Jon admired Robb's easy leadership. Of course, they did not have the Knights of the Vale. They had less than 1,000 Valemen. If they had 20,000 additional warriors, their tactics would be very different. Robb would be at the gates of King's Landing. Jon left the tent with Arya after instructing the Riverlords and Northmen on their place in the formation. Many commanders, including the Lightning Lord and Jory, had left to rally their troops. Arya looked at her brother nervously. She had never been seen battle before. Jon, do you have any special orders today? Arya asked. Yes. Don't get killed, he said, before turning serious. It will take time to deploy our troops. Even then, we do not know when they will attack. Eat, drink, and rest. And bring me the drummer boys. They will play an important role. We will need them to play loudly in the battle. Very loudly. Rose Bolton says he will repay us for our trust. He will regret those words. Moving quickly for the Tyrell army still took many hours. The sun was high in the sky when they sighted the northern banners. Sapras Garland had wanted to lead the Tyrell Lannister army, but he bit back any angry words. Randyll Tarly had taken the center, and next to the Lord of Horn Hill, Savraziad and Marbrand, and Grigor Clegane stood. Garland had been isolated to the wings. He understood why. His men were primarily light cavalry, armed with javelins, swords, and shields, and better for reconnaissance and patrol. Garland's men would fend off any attacks by Northmen on the flanks. At the very front of the army, 2 rows of light infantry had been placed to hide the formidable ranks of knights and heavily armed footmen. He was positioned on the center right with an excellent view of the battlefield, far better than Randyll Tarly on the front line. Garland was shocked at the enemy formation. For one, the Stark banner, the running dire wolf, could barely be seen. The banner in the front was an upside-down flayed man on a cross. The hands, feet, and head were white while the rest of the body was bloody red, the skin stripped off. He could see the Tully and Riverman banners to his right and the Stark banner to the left, clumped with several others in a throng of mounted men. But it was the infantry that was more surprising. The foot had advanced beyond their horses on the 2 sides, forming a crescent with the Bolton banner central to the half-circle. The center looked quite thin, and the troops that Garland could see were a mix of different units. Warriors with mermaid helmets, hairy mountain fighters with armored burnies and great 2-handed swords, devout knights with rainbow tassels and crystals on their great helms, and poorly equipped small folk in boiled leather. There were pockets of pikes jutting toward the sky but not readied for defense. Garland wondered why Lord Tarly had not already charged a charge. On the wings, the horsemen battled. Tully and Blackwood men attacked on the periphery, but that battle seemed half-hearted, with no one getting an upper hand. On the other flank, the Stark banner remained in place, but other cavalrymen charged hard, slamming into a band of Westerman scouts. The Reachman infantry barely reacted, too focused on keeping their column intact. The Lannister light horsemen were driven from the field easily. The battle, after all, would be determined in the center. Garland and his men were ready to advance. Then he saw why Tarly had been so confident. The grim sign of the hanged man turned away, and the Reach could only see the black cloth and not the bloody skinless body. The Bolton forces spun around, first the men nearest to the Reach army, but then the ranks further away, until they faced east toward the water. Confusion reigned in the front ranks as the cohorts nearest, one bearing a black horse head, and the other 2 long crossed axes, still faced west. House Bolton had betrayed the Starks. The charge had not been ordered because Lord Tarly intended the Boltons to attack as the vanguard. Garland wondered who had known of this treachery. Randyll Tarly, of course. The Lannister men, Clegane and Marbrand, must have too. That explained their presence at the front. Garland did not like such knavery and deceit, but he could do nothing now. The Northmen began to give ground, as the Boltons attacked their unsuspecting allies. Into this chaos, the Lannister army charged, the banner of the flayed man leading the way. As the northern line broke, knights and footmen rushed into the breach, certain of victory. Jon Snow reacted as soon as the banner turned. He motioned to Big Little, who took out a warhorn longer than his head, carved from an Oroxheed horn and banded with bronze. The eldest son of the clan chief of House Little was a mountain of a man with a voice like thunder. He lifted the great horn and blew, a long and low blast that carried far and wide through the entire valley. Eadard Karstark and Small John immediately called to their men, and Jory barked an order to the Mormonts to assemble. The Wintertown boys, already mounted on ponies, took off to call on the drummer boys. "John, the Boltons have started to attack," Oria said. On the field, soldiers wearing the flayed man struck down confused Rizlo and Dustin forces. Jon had placed the 2 houses closest to see if they would also betray the North. They had not, and that would cost them their lives. The blood that Rose Bolton shared with those 2 houses clearly did not matter a whit. The drumming began, a slow but steady beat. It was uneven at first, but then the small folk boys managed to follow the beat, and the crack of drums could be heard over the field. Lord Beric and his brotherhood, Sir Raymond Mallory, the Faith Militant, small folk, Manderleys, Glovers, Littles, Flints, Burleys, and Wolves, all of them began to retreat. First a slow walk, then an orderly pace, and lastly, a swift trot backwards. For a full moon, the pikemen practiced only 2 movements, and today they executed the second flawlessly. The bulging crescent vanished and then reversed. as the northern infantry formed into a tighter semicircle. This time, the central position was held by Mormonts, and Karstark and Umber infantry held guarded the flanks. Along the mile of the backward-bending crescent, the Wintertown boys dismounted, waving the banner of the White Wolf at 6 points. The infantry marched to the sigils, and the first to arrive were the pikemen. They stopped and turned, and the new formation took shape. Jon had sacrificed the lives of House Dustin and Ryswell, but that was only a few hundred men. At Highgarden, Ser Garland drilled often against 3 or 4 combatants, trying his best to simulate war. Nothing could prepare him for the smell and sound of a real battle. Thousands of men and horses stank, and that before the fighting began, he had heard men shat themselves when they died. He had not expected them to do so before even fighting. Green boys, nervous despite their bragging, fouled their reaches, and the battlefield already smelled like shit. Ser Garland was too far to smell the blood and guts of the men butchered by the Boltons, but he could hear their screams of surprise and shrieks of pain. Unlike the songs, few men died cleanly in war. Wounded men took a long time to die. "Look at the Northmen running for their lives!" Orden Merryweather whooped. The Reachmen anxiously waited for their chance to advance. Some rushed ahead, despite their orders. "We had best attack soon, else we will be too late for any glory." Lord Elkhart said, "I will take the White Wolf's banner as a prize," a knight boasted as he began his charge. Then Ser Garland heard the drummers beating in a slow rhythm. Boom, boom, boom. The noise had been hidden in the thunder of hooves and howls of dying men. Was the North sounding a retreat? He saw the banners far away, near the copper waters of the lake. There were many of them. A white wolf on dark field, waving proudly in the air. Something did not make sense. The northern center was breaking under pressure. Leinster cavalry and Lord Tarley charged ahead to bolster the Bolton attack, and men from the Reach poured into the breach. But at the left and right hills, the Northmen and the Rivermen had not retreated. Ser Brendan Tully remained with the Rivermen. On the other side, the banner of House Stark, a grey wolf on white, stood still. Garland knew that Robb Stark and Jon Snow were close. If one was threatened, the other would come to the rescue. And yet, even as the northern infantry fell back, the cavalry had not reacted. Why would they not move? The horses stayed still for a long while, as the battle raged, and the Reach chased the overmatched infantry further. Finally, at long last, the enemy cavalry began to move. Ser Garland's eyes widened in shock. Robb Stark was not retreating. He was advancing, and so were the Rivermen under the Blackfish. Something was terribly wrong. The semicircle had solidified into a mass of pikes and spears. Along the crescent, companies of pikemen had lowered their weapons, the long spears giving cover for the other northern forces to reassembly. Jon was at the center of the new line with Jory and the Mormont foot soldiers. Behind him, Nymeria and Ghost waited silently, guarding Arya. Behind her, Gendry and the other Wintertown boys were mounted, in case he needed a messenger. Jon glanced back at the lake, looking for the riverboats. Then he remembered the words of Leaf on the Isle of Faces. Water magic. Use the water against your enemies. There was power in blood, and he was the blood of the dragon. Jon turned to the water. The Isle of Faces was the last bastion of magic where the weirwood trees grew stronger and stranger. Why did they grow there? Was it merely a reserve for the children, or did the Greenseers choose the Isle for a reason? Jon had read the legends of the children and listened to the Citadel argue that those were only tall tales. Archmaester Cassander claimed the Arm of Dorne formed from hot summers and short winters on the shivering sea, not the hammer of the waters, and that the swamps of the Neck existed long before the Andal invasion. But what did an Archmaester really know? Jon reached for the water. He let his mind sink deep into the God's Eye. The lake stretched forever. A sheet of sun hammered blue. Something lay underneath the surface, strange, alien, and dark. Blue eyes that burned bright, blue blood that did not bleed, and pale skin whiter than the moon on a clear night. The cold struck Jon, bitter cold, that numbed the mind and froze the skin. The cold rose and spread, and birds fled, and fish shivered. The color drained from the God's Eye. The warm water sucked down to the depths, and the lake began to swirl. Jon pushed further. Fierce waves roiled the God's Eye, slamming into the shore, the crests riding high. The sky turned gray. As the very air was pulled down by the lake, pulled into the cold depths by the magic of the god's eye. Jon realized what would happen next. The wind came, a powerful, strong breeze that blew from the lake, whipping the air into a frenzy. The wind howled, blowing over the lake, blowing west into the faces of the enemy. "Jari, Arya, Jerry," Jon yelled and pointed to the sky. "Dust, we need dust." Jerry was the first to understand him. She slammed her spear into the dirt, and a small cloud of dust went up. Jerry gaped as the gray dust billowed in the field, caught by the fierce wind. "Mormonts, what are our words?" Jory cried to her men. "Here we stand." The fighters in full plate armor, great helms, and steel shields cried back. The she-bear stamped her steel boots and thumped the butt of her spear on dirt. 1,000 more mints did the same, and the huge cloud of dust blew directly into the Tyrell Lannister army. Other North and Rivermen began to mirror the Mormonts, and more clouds of dust rose. The wind continued to blow, throwing the grit and dirt into enemy eyes. He turned away, breaking the link with the god's eye. The lake held magic and mystery, but he had no time now. As the warmth returned to his blood, Jon hefted his spear and waited to meet the enemy. Behind him, the air howled and the sky turned gray and ashen. He was ready for the battle. At the back, Sir Garland tried to understand what was happening. The surge of knights, spearmen, and swordsmen should have swept away the weak enemy line. Victory seemed inevitable as the Reach charged into the center, led by treacherous Boltons. But the powerful onslaught lost its momentum, and the advance slowed and then ceased altogether. Men still continued to pour in from the back, and knights and foot soldiers were crammed together in their eagerness to see battle. The drumming stopped. The northern infantry had regathered under Jon Snow's banner. The long spears that had been pointed harmlessly into the sky now faced forward. Squares of pikes controlled the battlefield, soldiers crouching down to brace the butt of the pike in between their feet. A forest of spearheads bristled at chest level for the horses and formed two diagonal lines, forcing the Tyrell army inward toward the center of the northern line. The air was full of the groans of the wounded, the sound of blows to flesh or armor, the mingled shouting of the confident and the terrified. And over it all, a wind blew, a cold devil wind from the lake, whipping dirt and earth into men's eyes. From the edge, Sir Garland could barely see through the torrent of dust. The conditions in the center must have been far worse. "Sir Garland," his gangly squire Alan Ambrose yelled, "we are under attack." Sir Garland pivoted to the right, ready to take on the Blackfish. The Rivermen scouts pushed forward but were still contained by the Oakhearts and the Cranes. Sir, Aline screamed in fear. "Not that way," the other side, the young wolf. Sir Garland had positioned himself on the center right. The Stark banner had been to the far left. If Robb Stark was here, that meant the cavalry guarding the Tyrell left flank must be dead or dying. Sir Garland tried to wheel his men around desperately to meet the attack. He saw Lord Umber's giant in chains and the Karstark's white sun, but it was a mounted Robb Stark and the monstrous wolf running at full speed that led them. On the wings, Stark's companions threw a barrage of javelins, killing men and horses alike. Alan fell hard to the ground as his horse was slain. If there were more time, Sir Garland might have sounded the horn for retreat, but it was too late. The Reach had fully committed themselves to the battle. "They are coming," Jon said. Time had lost all meaning in the clamor and chaos of the battle. It felt like hours, but he knew it had not taken long for the flayed men to cross the field. Jon hefted a spear and picked up his shield. If he died today, let him die, defeating his enemies. "Gods, there are lots of them," Eddard Karstark said. The Bolton men outnumbered the center of the line 2-1, and behind the Boltons, there were thousands more. "A lot of fuckers means more men to kill," Small Jon Umber said. "Don't worry, Karstark, you look pretty enough already." "Enough," Jon said through his war helm. The Barbotar did not offer as much protection as Jory's visored bassinet. He stood next to the Mormont girl on the front line. Time to fight. The Small Jon and Eddard joined as the waiting came to an end. The Mormonts formed a wall. The first rank 100 men strong, with 10 rows of men. The House of the She-Bear wore the best plate armor, steel shields, and carried stout weapons. Bolton men wore fur over mail, pink cloaks decorated with red raindrops, and carried red shields decorated with the flayed man, hands stretched out. House Bolton rushed forward, howling and snarling, and died on the shield wall, the pink cloaks turning red as their lifeblood spilled on the dirt and grass. Jon stabbed and stabbed, the spear tip thrusting through mail hauberks. The ground turned muddy, but a red mud as hundreds of men fell. Row after row of Boltons died. They crashed against the wall, but the Mormonts, with better armor, shields, and weapons won. There was little room for individual glory, Jon thought. The Mormonts were well rested and fighting in a row. The few enemy strikes that got past the sturdy shields glanced harmlessly off the steel plate. As Mormont men tired, fresh troops could replace the front ranks. For their frantic enemies, that was not possible. They were pushed by a sea of men to be butchered at the wall. The Leech Lord approached, wearing a distinctive set of dark gray plate armor with rondels shaped like human heads screaming in agony and a helmet with fluttering streamers of red silk that matched his pink woolen cloak. Jon wondered whether Bolton chose this armor because he was certain of victory. Roose Bolton stood out on the battlefield like a sore thumb. "Snow!" Bolton had to yell because of the screams of the wounded. "He wants to fight you, Jon," Jory said, breathing hard from the battle. Jon motioned for Bolton to come. The Leech Lord walked closer, long sword in one hand, large shield protecting his torso in the other. Jon waited until he could see the cold, pale eyes in the painted red helmet, and then he stabbed the spear down, the blade driving into the gap between the greave and the ankle plate of the sabaton. Bolton went down with a yell, clutching his wounded left leg, and Jon twisted the spear, tearing tendons and breaking bones. The Leech Lord rolled on the dirt. The small Jan stepped forward and booted the heavy shield away. Lucier de Stark readied his long axe to strike. "Hold," Jon commanded. "Who ordered the betrayal?" "Bolton." Roose Bolton dropped his sword and took off his helm. His plain, colorless face looked at Jon with a disturbing stillness. "You know already, Snow. Tywin Lannister, but I want you to confess and tell us what he promised you," Jon said. "And why would I do that?" Bolton replied. Jon jammed the spear through the other ankle, crippling the right leg. "You are not the only house with sharp blades." Bolton screamed in pain. Jon lifted the bloody spear and smashed the shaft on the exposed bone, eliciting another moan of pain. "You haven't won, bastard. Tywin Lannister may still take your head," Bolton said. "Maybe. But you have lost, Bolton. Your men are dead, your house is dead, and soon enough you will be dead too. You promised this morning to repay us for our trust. You have. You led the Reach into a trap." Jon turned as he heard the whistle over his shoulder, not at all like the wind. The boats had finally arrived, piloted by Matoran Manderly and other men from White Harbor. Catapults launched rocks, and ballistas shot spears into the masses of confused Reachmen, their shields useless against missiles plummeting from high in the sky. The Tyrell army lost all cohesion as they desperately sought shelter, trampling and accidentally wounding each other in their retreat. Riders were thrown from dying horses, creating more confusion. Bodies began to pile up, of both the dead and the wounded. They were surrounded now on both sides. Sarah Brandon, Tully attacked their rear while Robb Stark and his companions assaulted the front. A knight with the sigil of a red castle on a white field fought like a demon, slaying 2 horsemen and wounding 3 others. Garland defended himself from a spiked mace, while Sarah marked Mollendor fall to a knight in red armor, marked with bronze runes. He had seen that wicked mace before at River Run in the hands of Daisy Mormont. In the Reach, girls were given dolls and sweets, and boys were taught never to hit girls. Those lessons clearly did not apply at Bear Isle. Sarah Garland blocked a powerful jab. His shield held, but the force of the blow staggered him. "Yield," Robb Stark's voice boomed. "Yield, and you may still live." An immensely fat man in green and gray plate mail used his bulk to smash into Garland's young cousin, Garrett Flowers. The boy tottered and fell over the side of his horse, and only his right spur stuck in the stirrup stopped him from smashing into the ground. Behind him, the Blackfish disarmed Lord Oakhart. Saver, Garland knew that the concentrated force of the Rivermen, the North and the Vale Knights, would overwhelm them. As he blocked another vicious strike, arrows whistled in the air. One bounced off his horse's barding, but others were not so lucky. Seer Garland did not fear facing 1 Northman or even 2 fighters, as skilled as Daisy Mormont. Being surrounded by 5 or 6 was too much. The situation was dire as Karstarks and Mallisters appeared at his flanks. The sound of heavy hooves came from the east. A giant man on a huge destrier burst through the Reach infantry, riding back through the lines. With one-handed swings of his giant 6-foot sword, Gregor Clegane cut a bloody swath through Tyrell forces, leaving dead bodies left and right. Clegane was posted near the front of the lines with Lord Tarley. The churl must have been fleeing the field, like a dog who had lost his master. "It is the mountain that rides," a northern knight with a sigil of a mailed fist said. "Kill the bastard." A heavy man with a great gray steel helm with a red horsehair crest cried. Robb Stark's men wheeled around to face Clegane, a tall, rangy man with the sign of the White Sun thrust into the mountain's right side, aiming for the armpit. The blade went between the plate, but bounced off the mail underneath. The mountain turned and struck hard. The huge blade cleaved the Karstark man into two, slicing through the shoulder and the right side, severing the entire arm, like a butcher hacking a pig into pieces. "Tauren," another fighter wearing the White Sun called. He thrust a spear hard at Clegane, the tip smashing hard on orange tabard of 3 black dogs. The barbed hook did not penetrate, but was stuck in the thick plate armor. Clegane lowered the tower shield. He ripped the spear away, first from the hands of his foe, then from his breastplate. The Karstark man's gauntleted hands grabbed the mountain's right arm in a wild attempt to wrestle away the bloody greatsword. The Karstark was strong and powerful, easily half a head taller than Garland. He looked puny compared to the mountain that rides. The mountain clubbed him with the edge of the shield, and then bashed with the shaft of the spear, driving Karstark to the ground. Had Clegane used the spear tip, his foe would be dead. Even with the shaft, Karstark lay prone and unmoving. "Grey Wind," Robb Stark's voice rang out. "Kill the horse." The great direwolf attacked the horse's haunches, where Clegane could not reach. Grey Wind bit into the back right thigh, severing the leg at the knee. The horse squealed its death throes and fell hard. Sire Gregor, 8 foot tall and in heavy thick plate and steel helm, stood up and swung his massive blade warily. Grey Wind snarled, but did not pounce. "Fine spears. The mountain is too deadly to attack with sword or mace. Use long spears and skewer him to death," Robb said. Easier said than done. Most of the cavalry had already used their spears and were down to swords and axes for close hand-to-hand fighting. Another man rode near and cried in agony when he saw one Karstark cut in half and the other lying unconscious. In the confusion, Ser Garland took out his ivory and gold-banded horn. He blew the horn, a long and plaintive sound for a retreat. Garland knew he was abandoning the other Reachmen, but the carnage was terrible, and his light cavalry had no chance of victory. The northern infantry semicircle had held, on both sides of the field. Northern cavalry and footmen had snaked up. To his right, he could see the Mallister winged helms and the Vance-quartered shield. On the left, the northern army had nearly completed the encirclement, Umbers, Karstarks, and Stark soldiers, and companies of pikemen held knights and infantry at bay in the tight confines of the crescent. If the sky was clear and Tarley willing to retreat, the Reach might be able to escape with horrific losses. But the sky was full of dirt and dust, and judging from the mountain's vicious attacks on allies, Tarley must still be trapped, unless Clegane killed the Lord of Hornhill in his flight. Garland realized that the Tyrell army was packed so densely that they barely had space to see, let alone fight. There were tens of thousands of men stuck in the middle, wearing heavy helmets, heavy armor, and holding shields to the sky to defend against missile attack. They were dead men, they just did not know yet. Gregor Clegane grabbed both of the Karstark horses by the bridle. He jumped on one, and in a show of stunning strength, pushed the other to block the direwolf. Clegane galloped off, and Serger Lane followed with what was left of the Tyrellite cavalry. Garland looked back. Robb Stark and his men were not pursuing. A less disciplined commander would have hunted the mountain down, but the horses of the Northmen and the Reach aimed to close the trap shut. Robb Stark's cavalry had no opposition now on the battlefield. The enemy forces had encircled the Tyrell army on 3 sides, and now the Northmen, Rivermen, and Vale horse would attack the rear. This had been Sar Garland's first battle. It had not gone well. The helmet sat on top of his forehead, so Jon could quench his thirst with cool lake water. There had been a lull in the fighting, and the more men in front, few ranks had taken a welcome breather. Jari, Eddard, and the small Jon rested as well, while others maintained the shield wall. "Lord Snow," Jerry said. Chet waved a white flag. They've run out of bolts and stones. Archers and crossbowmen showered the enemy with missiles, but the artillery on the boat was done. Even the wind had died down, although the sky was still gray with dust. Jon realized the cold in the water generated the wind, and that faded with time. Josiakar said, pointing west. Something strange is going on there. Across the battlefield, a half of a mile away, he could see banners assembling. Umber, what do you see? Jon said. Lots of dead cunts. The small Jon japed. This is serious. What are the banners? Jon said, standing up. Some ponce in red shooting arrows to the left. That burning orange tree at the Golden Tooth. Green and red apples. Cranes. A golden tree. Grapes. Leaves. These southern cunts have stupid banners. Who is scared of grapes or apples? The Smaugin guffawed. They are gathering their horses, Jory said. Jon stood up, buckled his sword, and picked up the spear. We have to go. Randyll Tarley is no fool, he said. What's happening? Arya asked. We have trapped the Tyrell army. If Robb succeeded, then we may soon surround them on all four sides. Tarley has realized that, and knows that if he does not break out, we will slaughter them where they stand. Charging straight into the pikes is death. His own forces prevent him from turning back. And even if they did, they would run into Robb's cavalry. Tarley means to break the circle by rushing forward. He will happily kill 5,000 of his men so that 10,000 can escape, Jon said. But we have held off their attack the entire day, Eddard said. We have lost a few dozen and killed many hundreds. 1,000 tired Boltons who fought their way through the field can be beaten by a shield wall, but 10,000 men rushing at us in a desperate attempt to escape is another matter. We have less than 1,000 fighters, and the front line is only 100 men. Tartally means to break free by overwhelming us, Jon said. My lord, what about traps or pits or building a wall? Jerry said. That had been impossible before because the infantry needed to retreat before the reach. We have little time. Also at the Red Fork, we had the cover of the Trident so we would not be attacked. Still, Jon thought quickly. Chet is right. A few hundred men can dig multiple trenches, 4 or 5 feet wide, 4 feet deep. Any horse charging would break their legs, and it would be easy to defend. Start to dig here, but I will fight at the shield wall. But Jon, why not fight at the trench? Arya asked. We can't dig the trench without cover. We will resist the Tarley charge as long as possible and buy as much time possible to fortify. There are simple defenses we can build at the shield wall. We can stack enemy bodies in piles and fight behind them, Jon said. You heard the master. Let's gather whatever wood we can get, Jerry cried to the other Wintertown boys. But Jon, a few piles of bodies won't be enough to stop so many men, Arya said. I will fight with you. Absolutely not, Jon said. I pray that Robb is alive, but if he is dead, you are my heir. You will be Lady of Winterfell and Warden of the North. Arya looked angry and then sad. I'm going with you. I'm just a third son, Eddard said, grabbing his long axe. Jon turned to Smaugin Umber. You are the heir to Last Hearth. Stay here and oversee the trench digging. Fuck that, Small Jon spat. I am not letting a Karstark outdo me. I have every right to be a hero and protect the North. They stood face to face, or rather face to chin. Given the Small Jon was a head taller. You will be a hero. If Tarley gets past our wall, the trenches will stop the Reach from escaping. This is a direct order, Umber. If men in the army don't follow orders, everyone will die. And if I die, I need someone to take command and bring Arya to Robb. I don't need the Small Jon. I can kill Southerners as well as he can. Arya yelled, spoken like a true northern lass. All right, Snow. I will do it. But when the Wolf Girl is safe, I am going to kill as many of these apple and grape and turnip knights as I can. My father can bring my bones north, Smaugin said. Rhaenyra stormed off and Nymeria loped after her. Ghost stayed at Jon's side. Jon hoped his sister would be safe with her wolf. Jory Mormont strutted over and planted a wet, sloppy kiss on Jon's mouth. I am not inheriting. We will fight together, Snow, and then I will drag you to Bear Isle. Watch it, Snow. She will chain you to her bed and have you satisfy all the she-bears. Small Jon Umber jacked. That won't be a problem for me, Jon retorted. That may include her mother, Makey. Small John roared with glee. If you die, Snow, I was glad to serve with you. You are a glorious bastard. Jon supposed that was a compliment. I hope the stranger does not come for you, my lord, Jerry said. Death comes when it does. Who wants to live forever? Jon said. He left with Jory at his side, and Eddard guarding the back. The parting with Arya had gone poorly, but her safety was more important than a fond farewell. In the end, the fortification at the front was simple, thanks to Geryon. The clever boy noticed that the broken spears and shattered weapons littered the battlefield. The Wintertown boys took a log and covered it with many projecting wooden shafts or spears. The spikes ran diagonally like sharp X's. 3 or 4 men could fight easily behind a defense. It would not stop a massive attack, but it would slow down the enemy. Every bit of time was valuable. In time, Robb's cavalry would close the pocket, and the battle would turn into mass slaughter. Further, to be trapped inside with thousands of dead bodies would be enormously distressing to the Reachmen. Robb's army could fall back to rest, retrieve their wounded, and send fresh troops to relieve the front line. The encircled forces had little room to maneuver. The ability to replace troops gave House Stark an enormous advantage over the doomed Reachmen. Torridley's attack finally came. Far off, Jon could see panic as the infantry on the wings pivot and charge inward. The rest of the army was herding the enemy into a tight square. When Robb attacked, the enemy would fall like wheat before a scythe. Jon knew he needed to fight for time. Desperate men surged forward, dying in great numbers. A horse raced through and jumped over a gap between 2 of the wooden defenses. Jon stabbed his spear upwards, ripping a gash so deep the entrails fell out. Ghost put the White Destrayer out of its misery with a bite through the neck, and Jon stunned Sarad and Marbrand with a shield bash to the head. A Wintertown boy snatched away Saradam's sword and bound the knight's hands tightly. The Mormonts fought with great fury, validating their house words, "Here we stand." Still, the horde of enemy fighters took their toll. Spears impaled many Reachmen, but the attack continued, and through the line, the Northmen gave ground before the horde. The front line lost half its number and was forced to retreat behind another set of spiked logs. The Reachmen were dying, but they had many times their number. A man-at-arms with a golden centaur landed a hit, knocking Jory's mace to the ground. Jon thrust his sword through the aventail, the flexible curtain of metal that covered the neck and shoulders. The man gurgled and died, and Jory retrieved her weapon. "Jerry," Jon yelled, "the pikemen must advance. Tell the drummer boys." The boy rushed to obey as Jon fended off 3 men. Ghost ripped a man's shoulder clean off, and Jon stabbed another through the throat. The 3rd soldier stepped to his right, only to slip in the pool of blood oozing from the torn shoulder. Ghost finished him before Jon could thrust his blade through the visor of the steel helmet. The Reachmen continued their attack. On his left, Eddard fell to a hard blow that shattered the shield on his left arm. Jon protected the youngest Karstark against attackers, but too much space had opened up between Jon and Jory. Reachmen surged into the gaps, hacking away with maces, axes, and swords. Thanks to Ghost, he still stood, but he wondered how much longer that would last. Many of the Mormont soldiers were down, dead, or injured. The drumming began again. This time it was not slow, booming sound. Quick rat-a-tats rang through the battlefield, and the noise panicked the Reachmen. Their fear was justified. Pikemen, guarded by archers and infantry, jogged forward in a steady formation, weapons held at shoulder level, and skewering men with ease. The pocket for the Tyrell Lannister army continued to shrink as northern spears, arrows, and swords cut down the outer ranks, and survivors were forced to pull back and huddle together. Behind him, the ground was full of half-dug trenches that would prevent escape if Jon and the Mormonts fell in battle. "Hooray!" Jon shouted. The Lord of Hornhill wore mail and boiled leather with only a breastplate of gray steel for stronger protection. He wielded a Valyrian steel, 2-handed greatsword. Heartsbane, Lord Tyrell, raised his helmet to reveal a sneer on his serious face. "Surrender, Lord Taxley. You can't win. Your men are trapped," Jon said. "I will not be beaten by a green boy." Tyrell snarled. "No, you were beaten by 2 green boys, my brother Robb and myself," Jon said. Taxley struck at the fortification, the Valyrian blade cutting through the wooden log like parchment. He grunted and stepped nearer, his sword pointed directly at Jon's torso. Randyll Tyrell was no Gregor Clegane, but Heartsbane was 5 feet long from pommel to tip. Tyrell's reach far surpassed his. The best strategy would be to tire out the Lord of Hornhill. Jon stayed on his toes, backing away at any potential strike. Tyrell used the remains of the spiked log to guard his back, preventing Ghost from flanking him. Jon, Ardia's voice called out. Arya, what are you doing here? Jon turned his eyes briefly. His sister ran toward him with Numeria, lightly armed fighters with short broad sabers charged with her. I got the boats to land, Arya said. Behind her, Ched and the other Wintertown boys shot bolts and whirled stones while the sailors reinforced the remaining Mormonts. With Numeria and few hundred fresh reinforcements, Tyrell's forces fled. Lord Tyrell, though, was more stubborn. He swung the two-hander straight down at his foe. Jon blocked the greatsword, but the force drove him to his knees and his blade down to the ground. Time seemed to slow as Heartsbane drew back. Before the Valyrian blade could come down for a killing blow, Jory Mormont struck Tarly's shoulder with her morning star. The furious Lord of Hornhill thrust the blade to his left, impaling the Mormont girl through her breastplate. Before the sword could be pulled out, Jon slammed his right gauntlet into Tarly's mail codpiece. Tarly screamed in pain and fell over. Jon smashed Tarly's ugly face with a shield, breaking his nose and knocking him out. Jon ran over to the fallen she-bear. The sword was still plunged in her body and faint traces of blood appeared on her lips. Her eyes were still open and her teeth gritted in pain. Seems like we won't go back to Bear Isle together, she said, coughing flecks of blood. Jon wrapped his arms around the dying girl. I'm sorry, Jory. I never meant for this. Give them hell for me, Snow. See you on the other side. Jory grinned her toothy, charming smile, and then her eyes closed forever. Jon held her still, warm body. He could almost imagine that she was sleeping. Robe rode through the battlefield to the lake. The carnage was immense, stacks of slain men, Reachmen, Westermen, Northmen, and Rivermen alike. Corpses looked the same in death, he thought. Thousands of horses lay dead and already flies buzzed over pools of blood and dead flesh. As a boy, he had thought there might be a terrible beauty in war. There was none here. War was only terrible. Robb had spared most of the enemy army. Sauter Baelor Hightower had ridden unarmed to his battle guard and surrendered in the sight of many Reachmen. The heir of Oldtown begged for the lives of his men. Even the North and the Rivermen had suffered thousands of deaths and thousands more injured. Robb granted mercy despite some angry bannermen. House Stark was fierce in battle but not butchers. Wolves did not kill for sport. After Ser Baelor surrendered, a dozen other lords and knights rushed to do the same. Lord Oakhart, Ser Vortimer Crane, Jon Fossaway, Orton Merryweather. He did not catch all the names. They cast down their weapons and took off their armor. Robb passed through the killing fields, shocked at the brutality of the battle. Soldiers saluted him and prisoners fell to their hands and knees as he rode by with Grey Wind. His guards stayed close, but after the death of so many, there was little appetite for more fighting. Men on all sides were happy to be alive. Grey Wind saw Arya, Numeria, and Ghost first. Arya, with the help of the dire wolves and the small Jon, watched over the injured and the prisoners. Roose Bolton, Adam Morbrand, Randyll Tarley, and many more. Here too, at the edge of the God's Eye, the slaughter was immense, and there were many Northmen and Rivermen dead. He smelled blood and vomit and feces, and thousands had been killed in terrifying ways. Bodies mangled and limbs hacked off. Robb said a prayer over the hundreds of dead Mormonts, the bravest and most loyal of his northern army. Jon crouched over Jory's body. Robb waited in silence for his brother to rise. Eyadia thanked the old gods that a gentle sea breeze, not a violent wind, blew from the lake. The medical tent, erected after the battle, hummed with activity. Small folk, soldiers, squires, vigils, and even fishermen pitched in to deal with the deluge of the wounded. The smell of honey, oil, wine, and vinegar dominated the tent, masking the stink of blood and wounded flesh. Dressings of cotton and flax were soaked in warm water, wine or vinegar, ready to be applied after wounds were washed and cleaned. Fresh medical supplies and basins of heated water lay on a completely covered oak table, restocked as quickly as they were used. Many hours had passed since the Battle of the God's Eye, and a line of soldiers still waited patiently for treatment. This was not due to a lack of urgency or preparation. Before the battle, large stocks of herbs, salves, and other concoctions were readied. When fighting ended, the Wintertown boys drove carts to carry the wounded on stretchers to the tent. Jon and Talia had done their best to treat the severely wounded first. Not all of them could be saved, but many were stabilized. Broken bones were set, and wounds were closed. Jon had extracted arrows and crossbow bolts, amputated limbs, and demonstrated the proper cleaning, stitching, and care of wounds, emphasizing that bandages were to be kept moist and changed regularly. Then her brother left, either to mourn Jari's death or to take charge of the prisoners. Uriziera finished distributing food and drink, warmed hardtack and bone broth. They had no bowls, so the soup was served in scavenged helmets, cleaned by boiling water. The Great Jon had drank 2 large helmets worse when a tray went flying through, scattering the slices of bread. Why are we healing these Reachmen? We should kill them all. In his grief, Lord Rickard had not combed or washed his hair or armor. His gray beard and hair was unkempt, and the Karstark sunburst on his chest was stained with blood. "The battle is over, my lord," Talisa said, looking up from stitching a wound on a leg. The patient was a gangly squire, whose well-fed face contrasted with the gaunt Rickard. "They are our enemies, we save our enemies, and do nothing for our own men," Rickard ranted. "My lord, we have done everything we can. Jon Snow saw to your son Eddard. If all goes well, he will only lose 2 fingers. As for Harrion, Snow and I have both examined him. We must hope he wakes. We can do little now, but wait," Talisa said. "They butcher my son Torrin, beat Harrion, and chop off Eddard's hand. And you want me to wait," he bellowed. He towered over the diminutive healer. "Karstark," the Great Jon pointed at the fearful squire. "That one had nothing to do with it. He fell off his horse. The mountain attacked your 2 older sons. Whoever struck Eddard is long dead." "And what do you care, Umber? Your son was digging ditches when my son fought." The Great Jon's face purpled, matching the large bruise on his cheek from an enemy mace. "Are you calling my son a coward? I thought Harrion was the only Karstark hit in the head." The 2 powerful northern lords circled each other. Rickard Karstark was tall, burly, and fierce, but the Great Jon's great sword was longer than Arya. They had not drawn their weapons yet. Daisy Mormont whipped out her menacing steel morning star. She had been visiting her injured soldiers while Lyra attended the dead. "If you idiots want to brawl, do it outside." Daisy snapped. Karstark stormed off, and the Great Jon sat down sheepishly. Besides the soon-to-be-extinct Boltons, no house had suffered the losses of the Mormonts. Talia smiled gratefully before returning to her work. "Daisy, I am so sorry about," Arya said. The she-bear set the morning star down. "I miss her too, sweetling, but she died fighting and she caught her wolf for a few nights at least." "She saved my brother's life," Arya said. "Bear Island is loyal to House Stark, and Jon Snow has Stark blood, and Jari was happy to stay at your brother's side. Snow vowed to return her bones to Mormont Keep," Daisy said. "I know my sister Arya, she would not want us to mourn her death, but drink, eat, sing, and make merry. Death is hardest for the living." "How was the battle on your side?" Arya asked. "Hard. There were many horsemen guarding the flanks, and they are good fighters. We were stronger, but we took losses. And then Clegane came," Daisy said. "Jon thought the mountain would be with the Lannister men," Arya said. "Clegane is a beast and a coward. He killed his own men and allies to escape. Snow told us that they hoped to kill him with pikemen. A good plan, better than fighting hand to hand. I understand why Lord Rickard is angry. His sons had no chance against the mountain." "Why do monsters live when good people die?" Arya said. "The war is not over. Clegane has escaped twice, at the Trident and at the God's Eye. His luck may still run out," Daisy said. Robb surveyed the men from both sides, occupied by the grim task of locating fallen comrades. Headless trunks, severed limbs, and bloated bodies littered the battlefield. 5,000 men had died at the Field of Fire, burned by the 3 Targaryen dragons. 10,000 had fallen with Daemon Blackfire at the Red Grass Field. And now over 20,000 men lay dead at the Battle of the God's Eye. Some bodies were unrecognizable, crushed or buried without mercy, as the northern trap constricted the life out of the enemy forces. Lord Stark, the speaker, was Ser Garibald, a knight who had forsworn a minor house in the Crownlands for the star crystals and the 7-colored cloak of the warrior's sons. He escorted 6 women in dull gray shrouds and cowls, stained with dried blood and a tired septon. "My lord," the septon bowed nervously. The seven-pointed star says that the afterlife is a sweet surcease, where men and women can voyage to a far-off land to laugh and love and feast until the end of days in the Father's golden hall. We know there are 7 heavens and 7 hells, and that a godly man will get on with it, the Blackfish barked. Lord Stark, sinners who do not repent of their crimes go to hell. The Silent Sisters wish to cleanse the bodies and prepare them for burial. Then the Septons, by offering prayers over the grave, will guide them to heaven. Sargabod said, if there are no prayers, they may be damned forever. The Septon squeaked, let the Boltons go straight to hell. Ruzier'll join them soon. The Greyjohn chortled. The Greyjohn might not have cared about the faith, but that was not true for the Rivermen, the Vale Knights, and the Manderleys. How many Silent Sisters do you have? Robb said. 12, my lord, but there are mother houses nearby in the Crown Lands. We could triple our numbers in a few days, and call even more in a week's time, the Septon said. Robb shook his head. That is not enough. Even at 1,000 bodies a day, it would take over a fortnight. We do not have the time. Jon says that unburied bodies carry disease that will afflict the living. I will not have injured men die to honor those already dead, but I will allow a barrow to be raised over the battlefield. You may clean the bodies and collect the bones after they are burned. Say what prayers and bury them as you will. Thank you, my lord, the Septon said, and men and women of the faith left to tend to the dead. Why do we care? Why aren't we marching to King's Landing? Lord Karstark yelled. Our men are tired. Our horses are tired. We have many injured, and we have prisoners. Robb said, the North had captured as many men as they killed. The Reachmen were stripped of armor and weapons, but still required guards. The veins on Karstark's neck bulged as he continued his rant. I say we kill them all. We should have slaughtered them on the field. Kill the prisoners now, and be done with these traitors. They surrendered in battle, my lord. I granted them mercy, Robb snapped. Mercy? What mercy did Tywin Lannister give your father, or the Mountain give Tywin? Karstark said. Our prisoners did not kill your son, Robb said. Then give me leave to hunt the Mountain. I will chase him to King's Landing and bring you back his head. But Karstark said, no, we do not know the terrain from here to King's Landing. Some Tyrell forces escaped, and they will certainly post lookouts on the Gold Road and the King's Road. They may ambush your forces if you move south now, Robb said. You may know how to win a battle, Lord Stark, but you do not know how to win a war. Karstark stomped off, past the other northern lords. Karstark is just angry over his sons, the Greyjohn said. I know, my lords. That is why I will overlook his remarks, Robb said. Then again, he was not certain he could punish Karstark. House Bolton was gone with its 2,000 men. The survivors from House Dustin and House Ricewell could be counted on 2 hands. As for House Mormont, half of their men died fighting. The rest were injured. Lord Stark, what do you plan next? The Blackfish said. Robb was not certain. He was not afraid of confronting the Tyrell army on the field. Attacking a city with tall walls and then the Red Keep on Aegon's high hill was an entirely different matter. And inside the Red Keep, Jon said there was an even stronger fortress, Maegot's Holdfast. Horses and cavalry would matter little in such a fight. For now, it is more important that our wounded return to health. We will see what the Iron Throne does in answer. You will have to address the prisoners. We cannot guard so many for very long. Brethren said. Robb nodded. He would need to see his brother. They had to deal with Bolton permanently. Jon Snow left the tent with the most valuable prisoners. There was the Leech Lord who refused to speak, a few dozen Reachmen who were happy to divulge any secrets, and Randyll Tarly, whose only words were yelling at his 2 sons to be quiet. He walked to the pewter waters of the God's Eye. The lake felt cool to the touch, and he could see stars reflected above. Something strange had happened here that afternoon, something inhuman and dangerous. The lake nearly froze, and there was cold worse than any summer storm in the north. Jon knew very little about magic, but he knew this. It was impossible for him to be able to perform any such sorcery. Seeing through the eyes of a wolf or a raven was one thing, but the God's Eye was the largest lake in the 7 kingdoms, and the water had been warm and green in the morning. It was barely conceivable that a Roshinar water wizard or a dragon lord in the Age of Heroes could freeze a lake, but he certainly could not. Something was under the waters here that stole all the warmth and color. He saw faces, death, pale and bloodless. Warriors marching, blue eyes and pale white skin. They wore ornate armor and carried long crystal swords that glowed faintly, like blue stars and moonlight. They vanished into white mist, and Jon wondered again what he saw. Was this the past, or perhaps the future, had they ruled the God's Eye thousands of years ago? These creatures had brought the cold, and they far surpassed any threat from the Tyrells or Lannisters. "Jon!" The voice of his brother broke his mind from the spell. He turned to see two dire wolves with Robb, an energetic gray wind and a silent ghost. He stood and walked away from the lake. There were things that he could not explain to Robb, and that included strange creatures of ice and cold. "Have the prisoners talked?" Robb asked. "The Reachmen have. The Tyrells still have men in the capital, 5,000 to 10,000 swords. Half the Lannister army fought here, and the other half is with Lord Tywin, and the throne has mercenaries. Gold cloaks and more guardsmen," Jon said. "And what of Bolton?" "He refuses to answer our questions. I doubt he will break. He has nothing to lose, and he will not tell us how he sent or received messages," Jon said. "Whoever acted as his messenger may be dead. All the flayed men were killed on the field," Robb said. "Perhaps, but he hid his bastard in another house. Bolton is cunning. There may be other spies for the Lannisters still in our army," Jon said. "Did Tarly say anything?" Robb said. "That one also wants to be quiet. But his sons say a man delivered a message this morning. They did not see the face or a sigil. The plot seems to be between Tywin and Roose Bolton, and Towerley, as commander, was informed. Sherbael or Hightower and the other Reach Lords claim no knowledge of the treachery," Jon said. "Stark wants to march for King's Landing. He desires the mountain's head, but I do not know if we have enough men. There are 3,000 men dead between the Boltons, Ryswells, and Dustins. We have another 2,500 dead and 3,000 injured, although many will recover thanks to you and to Lisa," Roose said. "So we really lost 500 men. But if our wounded die or are slow to heal, that could be another 1,000. Jon thought for a moment. "They only had 10,000 healthy men. What is your goal? Do you want to destroy the Lannisters? To take King's Landing?" "Can we take King's Landing?" Robb asked with surprise. "Yes, but we would have to be ruthless. Tywin Lannister burned the Riverlands. Do you wish to do the same to the Crown Lands?" Jon said. "March south? How would you attack?" "Do you mean to follow Karstark in hunting Clegane?" Robb said. "Karstark is a fool. You don't chase a mad dog. You force it to come out into the open. There are 4 roads into King's Landing. The King's Road, the Rosby Road, the Gold Road, and the Rose Road. The Tyrells and the Lannisters have failed against our army in the field. They will hide behind their walls. That means we can sack all the holdfasts and settlements nearby and deny them food. Burn the barley and wheat fields near Rosby and Stokeworth. Close the King's Road. Control the Blackwater Rush near the Gold Road. As for the Rose Road, the strength of the Reach is dead, captured, or at King's Landing. Highgarden will not resist us," Jon said. "Starving a city will take a long time," Robb said. "The long game wins. Lord Karstark would rather rush and storm the walls of King's Landing. Fighting with anger is foolish and gets men killed," Jon said. "You are angry at Jai's death," Robb said. "I am more than angry. Joffrey should have never died. I should have fallen at the God's Eye, not her. I will mourn her later, but our enemies will pay for her death now. And the siege may not take as long as you believe. King's Landing has 500,000 people, but only one source of clean water, the Blackwater Rush," Jon said. "Poison the river? Is that even possible for the Blackwater?" Robb asked in surprise. "No need. During the reign of Jaehaerys the Wise, Septon Barth dug wells outside the city to tap the riverbed. They built pipes and tunnels that carry fresh water into the city and cisterns that feed the fountains and squares of King's Landing. We destroy the pipes, empty the cisterns, and bury the tunnels. Without water, the city will fall." "So, you mean to cut off food and water? Tens of thousands will die, and Sansa is in King's Landing. If the city has no food or water," Robb said, "Senna will not die of thirst or hunger. Neither will Tywin Lannister or Mace Tyrell. The soldiers will suffer before the highborn, and the small folk before the soldiers. Their army will be forced to leave the keep and walls and face us in the open. Their men will be tired, hungry, and thirsty. They will die like flies," Jon said. "I do not know if I can go down this road. It is dark and bloody. Thousands and thousands will die, and Sansa's life hangs in the balance. Robb said, "And how do you plan to get Sansa back?" Jon said pointedly, "Victories are good, but winning at the God's Eye is not enough. The war ends when we raise King's Landing. The best way is not to attack the gates, but to choke the city into submission. Tywin Lannister raped, pillaged, and reaved the Riverlands. The siege of King's Landing is but a shadow of that." "But that was Tywin Lannister, not our father," Robb said. "Not my father," Jon fought. "My father died at the Trident. Robert Baratheon's war ended with a sack of King's Landing. There was no honor there. This war could also end that way. And the Iron Throne, or whoever sits on that chair, will not trouble the Starks again." When Arya emerged from the tent, the sun was already high in the sky. She had slept late last night, only leaving the medical tent when she was too exhausted to stay awake. Nymeria mambled over to her side, as tall and fierce as Grey Wind and Ghost. Arya's stomach growled. A large field kitchen was set up under a canopy near the lake. Arya breathed in deeply, smelling bread, fried bacon, and newly caught fish roasted over a fire pit. The bread wasn't dry hardtack, but rather freshly baked loaves. Soldiers and villagers unloaded ships, and sacks of potatoes, onions, and turnips were carried to the ovens. A shy village girl handed her a warm mug with tea and milk. Arya took bread off a large clay pot. It was delicious with a hint of fruit and reminded her of Hot Pie's cooking. "It tastes better with soft butter," Hot Pie grinned, holding out a tray of dire wolf-shaped bread. "Hot Pie, how did you get here?" Rougier asked her friend. Behind him, Gendry ate a biscuit stuffed with bacon. Nymeria sniffed at the tray, then turned her head and snorted. "After the battle, they sent a raven to Harrenhal. We loaded supplies and waited for the ships to come to Harrenhal. I sailed last night and landed at dawn." Hot Pie said, "Hot Pie has something to say." Gendry said. He looked like he had strained his face, thinking. The fat boy looked sheepishly down at the ground. "Ray, your brother Jon, he is a wizard." "What?" Arya said. "A wizard, a sorcerer, a master of the dark arts." Hot Pie looked around nervously. "That's ridiculous. Jon is a maester, not a magician," Arya scoffed. "Arry, that's what they say on the ships. The sailors and the captain," Hot Pie said. "I spoke to the men who sailed on the lake. They have never seen anything like that. A huge storm blew on the lake, waves 20 feet high, air as cold as ice," Gendry said. "So what? A bit of bad weather doesn't prove anything," she snapped. "Araza devil wind blew in the battle. There was no wind in the morning. I asked the Manderly captain. No wind like that ever blows on a river or a lake. Even on the shivering seas, he has never seen a storm that bad. And the wind blew dust and dirt into the enemy." "Your brother summoned the storm," Gendry said. Aruzero bit her lip. She remembered the sky turning the color of ash, Jon's cry for dust, and the Mormonts pounding their spears into the ground. She did not care what her brother had done. Jon had always defended her, and she would never question his actions. "Don't tell him I said nothing," Hot Pie said. "I don't want to be sacrificed and eaten by a demon." Graya rolled her eyes. "If my brother was a wizard, he would already know, and he would be plotting revenge against people spreading lies." Hot Pie looked about to piss his breeches. "It is not a lie," Gendry said. "The story will spread. People already whisper about him." "Jon doesn't dabble in dark magic. He only means harm to enemies of the North," Arya said. "Your brother frightens me. He frightens everyone," Gendry said to Hot Pie's vigorous nods. "Good. They should be afraid. The Lannisters, the Tyrells. My brother is a wolf, and he will kill anyone who threatens us," Arya snapped. They dragged Bolton by a rope. The Leech Lord crawled, crippled legs, incapable of walking. The Reach Lords and Saradata Marbrand followed. Robb Stark sat on top of a raised platform. But all the eyes of the army were on Jon Snow. Large wooden stakes had been hammered into the dirt with the crossbar tall enough to hang a man. Heartsbane rested on Jon's knees. He put the naked blade to the side when the prisoners squatted, hands bound, before the wooden dais. Roose Bolton was forced forward on bloody knees. The northern lords attended, and many of the rivermen and valemen, septons and small folk, snooped from far away. And the soldiers in the camp, even the wounded, went silent. "Any last words, Lord Bolton? Do you want to confess to your betrayal?" Jon said, "Why should I? I am going to die here." Unless you allow me to take the black, I have nothing to say, Bolton said. The wall is too good for you. Traitors to the north deserve death. Jon turned to Randyll Tarly. Bring him up. Two boys escorted Tarly to the stage. The Lord of Horn Hill stared at Jon, beady eyes in the hard face. If looks could kill, Jon might have cared about Tarly's enmity. Lord Chasley, will you confess to the treachery and how you plotted with Bolton? Jon said. I am no traitor, Snow. If you cannot keep your lords loyal, that is your problem. Tywin Lannister told me that House Bolton bore no love for the wolves. Take up your complaints with the lions, Torley said. We shall. But for you and your men, Lord Stark wants you to bend the knee. House Tarly will withdraw from any conflict from the north. You shall remain our prisoner. Your life is forfeit if any man from Horn Hill joins the Tyrell army. When our conflict with the throne ends, we will consider your release, Jon said. Randyll Tarly spat on the ground. And what will you do, bastard? I serve Highgarden, not the north. And Highgarden is loyal to the Iron Throne. We can kill you. Yield and House Tarly may live, Robb said. I lead Mace Tyrell's van before you and your bastard brother were born. Other people may care about such threats. I grew up as a soldier. I am not afraid to die with honor, Tyrell said. Very well. You will not die, Tarly, but you will see your men die. We'll hang them all. But first, bring out your sons, Jon said. Two boys were dragged forward, one very fat and the other quite young, and only a squire. Nail them to the stake. Vargo Hope died quickly, but he was tortured first. Your sons may survive for days. The fat boy blubbered as the small Jon grabbed him by the neck. Daisy and her sister took the other one and began to tie his arms to the cross. You would kill children? Tarly shouted. Children who fight in war can die in war. Where's Horn Hill? Jon asked aloud. 100 miles south of Highgarden, in the foothills of the Red Mountains, the older Tarly boy answered. I will take our men down the Rose Road. We will raid your lands and stack the skulls of your men higher than your lord's chair. They say you have a wife and daughters. Perhaps you will be alive when they die. I will burn Horn Hill, your castle, your lands, and your followers. I won't just end your line. I will erase any trace, Jon said. Chet handed him a hammer and half a dozen iron spikes. He examined the nails, picked 3, and walked over to the stakes. Jon placed the spike on the younger boy's right hand and prepared his swing. Stop, stop, Tarly cried. You win, bastard. You and your sons will remain our prisoners. You will write a letter to Horn Hill telling your remaining men to withdraw. This is what will happen if any Tarly soldiers fight against the north. Jon slammed Tarly's right arm down on the platform. Chet and another boy held down the arm. Jon drew Heartsbane and with one strike severed the right hand. Randyll Tarly screamed in shock as he saw the bloody hand flop on the grass. Chet rushed to get a brass tourniquet wrapped around the arm. You should have taken the first offer, Jon said. He turned to the other lords. Bend the knee now. I will not ask again. None of our prisoners will raise their arms against House Stark again. I do not care if that means they are dead, blind, or crippled. If they do fight against the north, I will cut off your hands. Tell that to your wives and heirs. Tell that to your castellans and knights. We will send ravens to the Reach. The Tyrells will know that they stand alone. And you will spare our men if we bend the knee? Sir Baelor Hightower said, Perhaps, but I will kill them all if you do not. Jon said. As Sir Bagsor and the others began to kneel, the other Wintertown boys piled up straw and wood near a stake. The now released Tarly boys quickly dropped to their knees. Chet poured black tar pitch on the kindling. Not too much, Jon said. He dragged Bolton by the leash to the stake. He wrapped rope around the legs. The arms were still bound together, so he did not look like the Bolton sigil. I thought Starks beheaded their enemies, Bolton said. I am not a Stark, Jon said. He finished with the ropes and spread out the straw and wood, so it was under Bolton's feet. Tywin Lannister will murder you, Snow. He will kill your dire wolves and skin them for a cloak. I am not the only one who will break faith with House Stark, he said. Who are the others? Jon asked. I will not tell you. One day, the knives will come for House Stark. The lions will hunt you down, you and all your kin, Bolton said. They can try, but your line ends today. Jon threw a torch and pitch-soaked kindling set on fire. Bolton's silent smirk turned into screams of agony as he was roasted alive and men covered their faces to avoid the smell of burnt flesh. It took a long time for Bolton to die. Margaery Tyrell missed the long walks in the groves, fountains, and courtyards of Highgarden. When she was younger, she imagined that the Red Keep would be like her ancestral home. Rings of white stone filled with flowers and statues, stables for fine horses, and fields of golden roses. She enjoyed exploring the Briar Labyrinth with her cousins, Mecca, Alla, and Eleanor. She ignored the tray of sweet corn fritters and cup of hippocrates to look at the city through the stained glass of the maiden vault. "Don't open the window," Olenna called. "We don't need the smell of shit." Her grandmother was right. King's Landing reeked like a whore, and not a courtesan who was perfumed with lavender and rose water. What happened to old whores? Did they settle down with the small folk and raise a passel of brats? For every pot there must be a lid. Have any ravens arrived from the Riverlands? Eleanor called. Her favorite cousin was betrothed to Alan Ambrose, a squire for her brother Sir Garland. Alan swore to wear Eleanor's favor in battle, versus the Northmen, and promised to marry when he received his knighthood. Garland has not written, Lady Lynette said, fingering the golden wood harp that her husband gave her for her name day. Perhaps he means to ride from the victory and surprise you. I hear that men enjoy a good betting after a fight, Mega cried. Then my grandson would be the biggest idiot in the Reach. After battle, he should send a raven to let us know that he is alive and well, and the Northern Army is 200 miles from here. He would have to ride for days, Olenna said. A page rushed into the room, wearing a bright red apple. My lady, a message from Sir Stephen, the boy said. Sir Stephen was the Fossaway Castellan. 2 of his sons were fighting in the Riverlands. The ladies looked on curiously as Lynette opened the letter. Her good sister turned pale with shock and dropped the note on the table. What is the matter? Lady Axlear cried. Lord John was captured. Stephen was ordered to keep the men at arms home, else Sir Brian, Sir Edward, Sir Tampton, and Lord Fossaway will all be murdered. Lynette said. Marguerite took the note and read, The White Wolf vows to cut off their hands if any man of Cider Hall fights against House Stark again. He may even burn them alive. Burn people alive? Does this Snow think he is another Aeneas the Mad? Lady Olenna asked, pushing away the silver plate of soft white cheese. She reached for the note. Lomis, the old stoop-backed maester from Highgarden, hobbled in the room. In his hand there were a dozen letters. Lady Olenna, the ravens arrived just now. They are all from the Reach. From which houses? Marjorie asked. Tully, Hightower, Crane, Ashford, Merryweather, Oakhart, and many others. Are there any from Highgarden? Olenna said. None, my lady. Lomis answered. Her grandmother took the letters in her thin spotted fingers. Her gaunt hands did not shake. Summon Loris and Mace. Olenna said. The master and the Fossaway page rushed to obey. Marguerite sat next to her and broke the seals. The other ladies gave them space, waiting for any tidbits of news. The Queen of Thorns would have the first taste, then Marguerite, and finally the lesser Tyrells and other wives. Marguerite patted Cousin Eleanor gently on the elbow. Every letter said the same. The captains of the Reach had been captured in battle. Long Table, Bitterbridge, New Barrel, Ashford, Old Oak, Honeyholt, Bedaddlen, the 3 Towers. The list of names went on and on. The principal vassals of House Tyrell had been rendered useless, hors de combat for any conflict in the Riverlands. Lady Melissa wrote the most complete note. She received 2 letters from the Riverlands, from her husband and her son, Samwell. Jon Snow chopped Randall's hand off for insolence, and Sam adds that the bloody wolf burnt Rose Bolton on a stake. Olenna said, But House Bolton is pledged to House Stark. Lynette said, Not anymore, Olenna said. The warnings vary, hands chopped off, eyes gouged out, burnt at the stake, crippled in both legs. Jon Snow is quite creative in threats to our bannermen. This Snow is a beast in human skin, Allery declared. Is there any news of Sir Garland? Yaxley. Marjorie knew that the girl wanted any hint to her fate of Allan Ambrose, her betrothed. If Garland was captured, he would have sent a raven to Highgarden or to King's Landing. My brother may have escaped with his men and his squire Allan, Marjorie said, or he is dead. The wolves may have butchered Garland and any Tyrell men they found. Olenna said brusquely, Oh, don't chide me, Allery. False hope will not help anyone. Many lords have been captured, but I doubt the Starks do so out of kindness. This stinks of the Golden Tooth. He has forced the Reachmen to submit with vile threats and cruel deeds. How could Lord Tyrell lose? He had greater numbers and the pride of the Reach, Allery said. Mates was certain of victory. Today, he planned to take delivery of a chair as hand of the king. I hope the craftsman made it large enough for his fat arse, and even fatter head, Olenna said. Perhaps, Eleanor said hesitantly. Perhaps these letters are false. A clever plot to weaken our resolve. Snow is a sorcerer and a trickster. Could this be treachery somehow? The messages were sealed with their sigils. Lady Taffrey and the others may have been sent false missives. But how would Snow know these names of the knights and lords? And why would he threaten to kill men who were not his prisoners? Olenna said, No, we must treat the ravens as real. If this is some twisted jape, the Tyrell army will still be standing. Lors rushed in, worry on his beautiful face. That concern only increased at the sight of his despondent good sister, Lady Lyanna. Grandmother's sister, what has happened? Lord Taylee was beaten in the Riverlands. Thousands of men have been captured, including Sir Byler, Jon Fossoway, Randall Tarley, Owen Merriweather, and many more. Olenna said, But, how is that possible? And what of my brother? Loras asked, half panicked. We don't know, and it is no use wasting time over things we do not know. Olenna said, Who do we trust the most at King's Landing? No one, grandmother. King's Landing is full of liars. Loras. The Queen of Thorns gave Loras a withering stare. Who of our men do we trust? We have 10,000 at King's Landing. Surely one of them can carry a message. Siddur Gunthor Hightower. He is the third son of Lord Leighton, and wedded to Jon Fossoway's niece. He studied at the Citadel so he would know how to send a raven without the aid of a maester. Margaery said, Good, Lord Gunthor rides south. When he is out of this shithole, send a raven to Willis with news of the battle in the Riverlands. He should then take a ship at Tumbleton and sail down the Mander to Highgarden. Then he can deliver the news in person and make certain Willis prepares the castle for any attack. Olenna said, Highgarden is 700 miles away. Surely the Starks will not attack, Loras said. Bitterbridge, Long Table, and Cider Hall lie between the Riverlands and Highgarden, and all three lords are captives. Do you think our bannermen will stop them on the Rose Road? I do not want my home sacked and pillaged by a horde of Northmen. Olenna said, Grandmother, we need to approach the Starks. We need to ransom the prisoners. Margaery said, We have duties to our bannermen. Margaery, you are not thinking of going north. They might capture you and hold you for ransom. An alarmed Loras said, No, Loras, I did not mean myself. What about Owen Fossoway? He is friends with Snow. His father was captured. House Fossoway has many ties to our family. Margaery said, Yes, he would do well. Find Owen. Tell him we will offer a ransom for our men. As a friend to Snow, he would be treated well at their camp. He would make a good spy, Olenna said. But will he spy on the north or will he betray our plans to them? Loras said, What plans? We're sitting on our arses doing nothing. Olenna said, Even if Owen is loyal to Snow, he will tell us of the size of their army and the state of their prisoners. We know very little now. Better to hear a tale from Owen's eyes than rumors, falsehoods, and travelers' tales. Margaery said, If these Northmen killed Garland, I will avenge my brother. Lorsier said, Don't be an idiot. We lost one army in the Riverlands. We don't need to lose another. Rushing to fight the Starks is a fool's game. Olenna said, And speaking of fools, Mace Tyrell waddled into the room, a jovial smile on his plump, ruddy face. Hello, Mother. What did I miss? He stuffed a lemon cake into his mouth. The feast was unworthy of a lord of Dorne, particularly one just returned after so many years. The Martells had sent ravens, but many bannermen did not come, despite the news of Lorch's capture. Starfall was almost 1,000 miles away, and the Wiles, Manwoody's, and Huronwoods were busy guarding the Prince's Pass and the Bonway. Any army that marched to the Reach or the Stormlands would have to pass the Red Mountains through these two routes. The new Lord of Starfall did not take offense, not even when a raven arrived, bearing his Aunt Illyria's regrets. Edric was a kind soul, without the martial spirit of his uncle, Arthur. In training, his old friend, wielding the great sword Dawn, could not be beaten. One day, Edric might be a knight, but Oberyn doubted the boy would be the next sword of the morning. The older Fowler girl sat to the left of Lord Dane, and the younger Fowler girl at his right. The Fowlers was several name days older, but the sisters were hawks, eager to swoop on any suitable man or boy, judging from the blush on Edric's face. None of the Sand Snakes, not even the younger ones, bothered with Edric. His girls scorned anyone who did not fight. They preferred to flirt with the Foresters and hear more tales about the wolves in battle. Elia and Obella even spoke to Saruman, and the Reachmen wore armor decorated with sunflowers. The Dornish bowed to the sun, not silly yellow flowers. Oberyn greeted his old squire Daemon Sand. Daemon's grandmother, the Lady of God's Grace, whispered to Lord Harmon Oler and his brother Ser Olwick. The lords of House Gargalen and Dalt scowled at Myrcella Baratheon, but Cerulus spoke kindly to Trystane and his princess. His most sensible daughter recounted a few amusing tales of foolish maesters at the Citadel. Serving men filled the cups of Dornish strong wine, dark and sweet, and ladled a delicate soup of eggs and lemons into bowls. Oberyn ate and drank very little. He was happy with simple food, flatbread, chickpeas, olives, and white cheese. He did not want sweet pies of suckerfish and lampreys, capons glazed in honey and almond milk, or savory snake stew. Fighting and fucking pleased him far more than eating and drinking. A tall, fierce girl with blazing red hair approached his seat. Horatio Hota stepped forward, the great long axe ready to guard Doran. Oberyn needed no protection. Vulina, Arianne said. His niece stood up to embrace her friend. The girl curtsied with a boldness fitting of the Dornish. Prince Doran, my mother, Lady Namella could not come. But I brought someone who would see you. My lady, I am not certain this is wise. An old man with links on his collar said. Foligny quieted the Maester with a glance. She gently led a girl forward. She was short, plump, and shy with the red hair of the Tolans of Ghost Hill. This is my younger sister, Tiara. My prince, her humors are unbalanced. She has too much bile from eating rich foods. She needs to purge herself of her excesses and stop with this nonsense, the Maester said. The pudgy girl balled up her hands. I hate you, she declared. Sorella approached. Archmaester Ebros believes the four humors are a load of codswallop. He has studied the heart and lungs to see how blood circulates around the body. Vile sorcery, the Maester sneered. Does Ebros still rob graves? The Archmaester experiments on snakes, fish, and small animals, Sorella said coldly. Tiara looked up from her feet. I have seen things. Her pale face met the gaze of Oberyn, Doran, and Arianne. She no longer looked like an inadequate child of a powerful family. I see them, fire made flesh, flying high above the skies. What do you see? Oberyn asked. Dragons, Tiara said. 3 dragons. The first is black and silver, pretty, but held on strings and sticks. The second is silver and gold, born again in blood and fire. But it is the third dragon that is the greatest, black and red. Scarlet wings and blood-red eyes. A dragon whose breath can melt steel and stone and fuse sand into glass. The last dragon was the last dragon, that is known, Allaire said. Sailors tell stories that Daenerys Targaryen has birthed 3 dragons. Oberyn said, but we do not know the truth of it, and any dragons born to her would be young, easy to kill with a scorpion, catapult, or even a spear. I saw the dragons dance, all 3 of them, and everywhere the dragons danced, people died, Tiara said. The dance happened when dragon riders fought each other in the air. Daenerys Targaryen may have 3 dragons, but they are far too small to ride, Doran said. We are House Martell. Even dragons must bow to the sun. Oberyn said. Tiara shook her head. The last dragon will blot out the sun. Death comes in his wake. The pudgy girl began to cry, and Valena wrapped her arms about her sister and led her away. Oberyn was not the only one who saw the message slipped in Doran's hand during the feast. Alleria, Arianne, and the Sand Snakes did as well. Maester Miles might be an expert healer and a capable tutor, but he lacked any ability at deception. Oberyn was not surprised that his brother requested his presence that night. He did not expect Edric to attend, and with the shy boy came Arianne and her cousins. Alleria had at least forced his younger daughters to bed. Doran dismissed the young maester. A large raven sat on the golden wood table, peering at the Martell family with beady, suspicious eyes. Doran patiently extended his hand, and the bird gave up the message. "Edric, this raven came for you this evening," Doran said. "But my aunt already wrote that she could not come," Edric said. "The sigil is not the sword and star of House Dane. It is a white wolf on gray." Doran handed the letter to the boy. Edric took the letter and broke the seal. Arianne inched closer, and the sand snakes stared at the young Lord Yane. The boy was certainly taking his sweet time to read a short note. "What does the letter say?" Obara demanded, her hand on a whip. Edric looked up, a smile on his good-natured face. "The Starks defeated the Reach at the God's Eye. Jon writes that they killed 15,000, and captured another 15,000, including Lord Tyrell, Lord Fossaway, Lord Merryweather, Sir Baelor Hightower, and many others. He asks when I will return north with the Dornish. But they are just young boys. How could they win so great a victory?" A stunned Arianne said. "Wolves are good at fighting, rosies are not," Cirilla said. "With so many captured, the Reach is weak, and many of their strongest lords are prisoners or at King's Landing," Na Maria Sand asked. "Father, we can attack now. Send Fowler men through the Prince's Pass, and the Yirn Woods over Bonway. We can teach the Reach and the Stormlands to fear our spears," Arianne said. "We are not Ironborn raiders. Our feud is not with Highgarden or Storm's End," Doran said. "And why not?" "The Reach stands behind the Iron Throne. The Tyrells have married their rose to the lions, and the Stormlanders killed our men in the rebellion. The time has come to get revenge for Dornish blood," Arianne said. "Edric, what did Robb Stark and Jon Snow ask for?" Doran said patiently. "Dornish swords and spears to fight the Lannisters," Edric said. "The Lannisters," Doran repeated. "Not the Tyrells, not Hornhill or Old Town, and if we march north over the Bonway, our men would pass 400 miles before King's Landing. The Stormlords are not likely to grant safe passage through their lands. Who cares about the Stormlanders? 2 stags are dead, and the other is a kinslayer. The Stormlords will hide in their castles, just like you do," Arianne said. "You will care, cousin, when they bleed our men. An enemy army in Dorne would get no peace. Why would it be different in any of the other kingdoms?" Sadara said, "We have no alliance with the North. Before I sent 10,000 men to die in the Riverlands, we must understand the Starks' plan. Will they attack King's Landing? Will they sack the Reach or the Crownlands? Will they ally with Stannis Baratheon?" Doran said. "Our men will not die. They fight for the glory of Dorne," Albarda said. "They will fight, and they will die. In war, men on both sides die, and there is little glory in skulls and bones," Doran said. "By the time you understand these things, the war will be over. Either King's Landing will fall, or the wolves will be beaten," Arianne said. "We should send men north. But there may be another way that doesn't cost much." "Dornish blood," Cirilla said. "The North may need spears and swords, but they also need information. If the Starks know the Lannister plans, Lord Tywin has no chance in an even battle. If the wolves could get enough men through the walls, no city will resist them. You want us to be spies and open the city to another sack. That will not be easy. The fat flower and the old lion will not trust us, and the spider will watch with his little birds. A raven cannot fly from Sunspear without our knowledge. It will be no different in King's Landing," Oberyn said. "No one said it would be easy, father. You have waited 16 years for vengeance. Why not go to King's Landing and send a message to the Starks? If we betray Lord Tywin's location on the battlefield, Jon Snow will kill the old lion," Cirilla said. "I would rather kill him myself," Oberyn said sourly. "You will come with me to King's Landing, and Ilaria as well, but her children will stay behind in the Water Gardens." The Iron Throne promised Dorne a position on the small council. "We will come too, father," Tywin said. "Revenge, intrigue, and danger. We could hardly let Cirilla go alone." Obara and Nymeria nodded in agreement. "You are not going," Doran said to a disappointed Arianne. "Bad enough. Your cousins risk their lives in a snake pit. I will encamp a Dornish host at Yirn Wood, ready to cross into the Stormlands on my signal. And Edric, give a message to this Snow. If he can deliver Tywin Lannister and Gregor Clegane to Dorne, we would be most grateful." "What of Trystane and his little lioness?" Oberyn asked. "Myrcella is not to be harmed. Even if the Iron Throne falls, House Martell will honor the betrothal," Doran said. She is a bastard of the Kingslayer and the Queen. If the Lannisters have no claim to the throne, what can she offer? A Dornisheman will never rule Casterly Rock, Nymeria said. She is my ward. I will not see her harmed, Doran said. A ward is a hostage. If her family dies, a hostage is not needed, Nan said. We are not Lannisters. We do not kill little girls in Dorne, Oberyn said. She will not be little forever, Tyene said sweetly. Milady, milady, the serving girl cried as she ran. In her flight, the young village lass still carried a woven basket of clothes, freshly washed in the lake. Radia refrained from correcting the girl. Every small folk, boy or girl, man or matron bowed and scraped before her, and called her milady. At Winterfell, she had been Arya, underfoot, more interested in riding and exploring. But at the God's Eye, she was the White Wolf's heir. The Rivermen and the Vale Knights deferred to her, and the prisoners from the Reach gave her a wide berth. They were afraid. Milady Stark, the girl nearly fell as she curtsied. At least, she didn't kneel, Arya thought. Me and Shira saw riders coming up from the lake waving a white flag. A white flag meant a request for negotiation. How many? And what were they wearing? The girl held out 6 fingers. The one in front was in brown and red. The others were male, but carried no weapons. At least not that we could see. Thank you, Bandy. I will go see them. She stepped past chained men carrying water for the horses. They lowered their eyes and murmured. The Manderley overseers nodded respectfully, and other soldiers began to draw swords and spears as the strangers came into view. The leader was a broad-shouldered, brown-haired, and square-faced man with a red apple on his plain doublet. He was older than her brothers, but not by much. He gave a short whistle, and all 6 horses stopped. They dismounted, and Arya could see that the hilts of their swords were tied to the sheaths, making it difficult to draw. The 3 in the rear carried unstrung bows and arrows, and the quiver were also tied together. Lady Stark? The brown-haired man bowed low. How do you know who I am? Rhaenyra asked suspiciously. Northern Knights and Stark guards stood behind her. Nymeria bared her teeth in a silent growl. You have a dire wolf, just as large as the 2 I saw at River Run. My name is Owen Fossaway. I was a friend of your brother at the Citadel. The man said, This isn't the Citadel, boy. A tall Northman yelled. Arya wasn't certain if it was Robert or Galbart Glover, but I'm still Jon Snow's friend. Owen said, I am here to see your brother, Jon, and to ask about the Reachmen that you captured. You hold my father, my cousins, and many of my friends, he said. This could be a trick, Glover said. I will show you the way. Rhaenyra handed the Reachman a small bottle. Peppermint oil. You will need it for your nose. They walked west to the battleground. Several days later, traces of the battle littered the field, broken arrows, shivered spears, chipped swords, crushed armor, and dried blood. Even with peppermint, Arya gagged from the overpowering and oppressive stench. Men worked hard to bury the dead. Deep trenches had been dug, and unknown bodies were placed there. Rows of graves had been constructed for the highborn, and Jon ordered a cemetery erected with the names and houses be preserved for the honorable dead. It was difficult, back-breaking work, but the prisoners did not complain. They feared being burnt alive. The dead Boltons filled a nameless grave with Rosie's blackened body on top. Lord Bolton's screams in death stunned the prisoners, and the Vale and Rivermen turned away from the burning. Rubb defended their brother wholeheartedly. He had told the Septons that they could chant prayers and recite hymns, but no one would mourn the traitor Bolton, and no one did. Piles of dry straw kindling, wood and pitch had been gathered on mounds of earth. Dozens of crude coffins were piled, and the Silent Sisters had washed and cleaned many bodies. She found Ghost and her brothers standing over Jarl and Mormain, lying in full plate mail, with shield and morning star over her chest. Jon knelt and placed the bassinade above Jar's head. Lord Snow, Owen said. Jon stood up. Owen Fossaways, I am surprised to see you. I came to ransom my father and any other Fossaways, Owen said. I am not surprised that you are here, but that you came so quickly. The Raven flew to Cider Hall 4 days ago. You could not have traveled from Cider Hall, Jon said. I didn't, Owen said. Then who ordered you to come? Sir Garland, Jon said. Sir Garland is alive, then. I am glad, Owen said. Jon chuckled. It is a wonder you did not cross paths. Sir Garland fled the battle with the Mountain. We do not know if they went south or east into the Crown Lands. Jon, I ask for mercy for my family and countrymen, Owen said. What would the Reach have done if we lost? Lord Taylor does not seem like a merciful man. Jon gestured to the bodies of the Mormont soldiers. Many were placed on the central mound. His charge at the end of the battle cost many lives. You told me that holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal. When you throw it at someone, you are the one who gets burned. Owen said, I would not be burnt. I would use a catapult, Jon said. If you wish mercy, tell the truth. You were sent. If not by Garland, then another Tyrell. But if you are honest, then I shall be fair. Arya, find Robb. He will wish to hear. Arya sat down with Robb and waited for Owen to speak. Freshly woven mats of sweet-smelling rushes were placed on the grass for the Starks and their guest. The Reachman finished a swig from a wineskin that Jon had offered. 3 days ago, the captain of the guards delivered a sealed letter to me at Tumbler's Falls. It was signed by Mace Tyrell, but I am certain the message comes from Lady Olenna. The Tyrells want no further conflict with the North. They ask that prisoners be released. Highgarden and the Reach will pay a ransom, Owen said. Are the Tyrells going to break with the Lannisters? Arya said. I don't know. News of the battle has not reached Tumbler's Fall. Owen said to her surprise, it takes several days to ride from here to King's Landing. The Tyrells only know because of the ravens we sent to the Reach, Jon said. Why should we help the Tyrells? Robb said. They are keeping Joffrey on the Iron Throne. Lady Marguerite is still to be queen. The Tyrells will have a great deal of power in King's Landing. 2 of their bannermen are already on the small council. The North is not the only one who remembers. The Reach will not forget your victory or your mercy, Owen said. Her brothers looked at each other. A year ago at Winterfell, Robb had been just her big brother, quick with a smile and happy to spar in the yard. Jon had been her other big brother, a fond memory exiled to Old Town, whose letters never failed to bring cheer. All the softness was gone and they were hard and lean, like wolves, Arya thought. She wanted to be a wolf too. I want my sister back. What can the Tyrells do to return her? Robb said. I do not speak for Highgarden, but I do not think the rest of the Tyrell forces will be eager for battle, Lord Stark. They certainly would trade Lady Sansa for peace. Perhaps, Owen said. Jon snorted. Actions matter, Owen, not words. And these words are as empty as Lazy Leo's head. If the Northern Army appeared before the gates of King's Landing, would the Tyrells surrender the city, or would their men attack from the walls? I am a messenger, not a general. If I was Lord of Highgarden, we would be sipping wine and eating fire plums. I always hoped you could come to Cider Hall, marry a cousin, and stay in the Reach. I told the Tyrells they should offer you a bride, Owen said. A bride among the Fossaways? I will try not to kill any of my good brothers, Jon smiled. Owen, how close are the families of the Reach? Very close. My father married Mace Tyrell's sister, so Sir Garland and Lady Marguerite are my cousins, and Lady Olenna was a red wine. Lord Leyden Hightower had 10 children, and most are married in the Reach. My sisters and brothers married into House Tyrell Hightower, Crane, Oakhart, Rowan, and Red Wine, Owen said. You have large families, Reb said. It is the Reach, my lord. It is a very fertile land, Owen said. We will show mercy, but your lords will remain hostages, Robb said. Tell the Tyrells that the North demands the return of Sansa Stark. What are you offering for the other prisoners? Jon said. Gold for their return south. They will not fight against you again, Owen said. 20 dragons for every man at arms, 40 for squires and crossbowmen, and 60 for knights, Jon said. Owen gulped. A high price. How many Fossaways were captured? Jon shook his head. The price is for all of them. 15,000 men. 15,000? Owen squawked. We will not pay for the Westermen. We took only a few hundred Lannister prisoners in the battle. Most died when they charged the shield wall with Tarly, Jon said. 15,000 prisoners. That is a great deal of gold. I am not certain how long it will take the Reach to raise such sum, Owen said. As you say, the Reach is a very fertile land. There is a price to be paid for helping our enemies. But your men will be safe, Jon said. And there will be no executions of our commanders? You will treat my father and our lords and knights fairly, Owen said. So long as the prisoners do not take up arms again. they will never fight the North. If they keep those vows, the Highborn will not be harmed. Jon said, "That is quite fair." Owen hesitated. "Jon, what of their swords and horses? Many of the men are farmers, small folk, or castle guards. With their mounts, they could return home more quickly." "You want us to return your horses?" Robb asked in surprise. "They are not much use to us," Jon said. "We are not Dothraki. We cannot feed 10,000 horses. The Reach promises that their men will ride south immediately without bloodshed. After this battle, I doubt that any prisoner wants to continue fighting. These men will go south to Tumbleton and take the Rose Road home," Owen said. Her brothers spoke quietly before coming to an agreement. "Very well, Owen. The prisoners will return home with their horses. They can take back arms and armor, but must swear to only fight for self-defense. We will give them a few days of rations for the trip home, but the Tyrells must swear to pay our ransom," Jon said. "That is more than 500,000 dragons," Arya said. "Thank you, Jon. Your terms are more than fair. The Tyrells will be glad. Well, except for the gold dragons," Owen said. "Highgarden is rich, and the Tyrells will collect the gold from Cider Hall, Old Town, Tumbleton, and many other bannermen." Jon smiled. "You will have to sell more apples and cider." "I will send ravens to Highgarden, Tumbleton, and King's Landing," Owen said. "When we receive the letter from Lady Olenna or Lord Mace, we will release your men. I will also speak to my lords and Jon to the prisoners," Rose said. "Yes, but first we have to say goodbye to our dead. You may attend," Jon said. By sunset, news of the agreement with the Reach spread far and wide. Not the Ransom or Fosaway's role as a messenger, but people knew, though, that the prisoners might soon be released, and returned their horses and arms. A palpable sigh of relief went through the camp. No one wanted to see more men burnt alive. Arya stood with the Northmen as Jon and Robb walked about the funeral pyres with torches. Owen sat with his father, and several Reach nobles, the Rivermen and the Vale Knights, also attended. The kindling and pitch caught fire quickly, and the coffins of the hallowed dead burned brightly on the biers. There were tears of farewell and salutes to the courage of the fallen. No house was praised more than the Mormonts. The flames rose high, and the wind blew from the lake. The fires were cleansing, and the smell of death dissipated into the night air. "I thought we were taking the bones back to the north," Arya said. "We are," Daisy replied. "Jory's bones will be collected into an urn. For the other Mormon soldiers, Snow will raise a barrow on top of a hill, overlooking the lake, for their bones to rest. My sister died, but her name will not be forgotten. When men wonder who won this battle, they will know that it was the She-Bears." "I would rather Jory live than be remembered, but no one can outrun their fate," Lyra said. "The stranger comes for us all." The flames finally died, and the army sat down for dinner. A rider came from the north, a burly knight on a brown destrier wearing the colors of House Tully. My lord, the knight breathed heavily, and as he took off the helmet to reveal a bald head, Arya could see the sweat pouring down his face. The old man looked as exhausted as his horse. "Sir Robin, you left a week ago for River Run," the Blackfish said. "Why have you returned?" "The Kingslayer is gone," Robin Ryder gasped. "What? How did he escape?" Rode yelled. "He did not escape. Lady Stark set him free." The knight answered before falling to his knees. Tyrion ignored the pounding on his door. It was not yet noon, which meant he was far too sober to deal with fools and idiots. Word of the massacre sent the entire city into a panic. Small folk streamed out of the gates, hoping to find shelter in the Kingswood, the vast primeval forest to the south. Crackpots and begging brothers gathered in the squares, wailing about how the North would butcher those who did not repent their sins. Tyrion doubted that Robb Stark or Jon Snow would give two shits about the rantings of Septons. If he was about to die, he would do so with a whore and a bottle of wine. He guzzled down a flagon of Arbor Gold. "Is that the Northern Army at your door?" Bronn said, as he cleaned his nails with an ugly knife. "I hope so. Then they can end my suffering." Tyrion kept his tone light. The last thing he wanted was the sellsword to desert. Jeps were one way to keep the fear away. Wine was another. Drinking allowed him to stay sane. He and Varys had kept their wits at the small council meeting held in the Red Keep last night. The same could not be said for a flummoxed Mace Tyrell and the other Reachmen, his screaming sister, and a pathetic Pycelle. Baelish was away in the Vale, wooing Lysa Arryn. "Open the door!" MPAM. Sir Mern, Trant loudly demanded. Tyrion sighed and nodded. 2 white cloaks stepped forth, flanked by his cousin Lancel. Cersei had once jested that Jaime was the stupidest Lancina. Clearly, she had not remembered their younger cousin. Lancel flourished a scroll. I bring orders from the king. He demands that Sansa Stark be handed over for punishment. Where is the Stark girl? Trant said, sword in hand. Both Trant and Sarbors Blount wore a set of gleaming plate armor and a crested T-shaped helmet. She is staying here, Bronn replied. In the blink of an eye, he drew a long sword and a dirk. The sellsword wore only black ringmail over leather, but he relied on speed over sheer force. Call off your dog, Imp Trant said. It is treason to attack a Kingsguard. Bronn stepped to the side, in an obvious attempt to flank Bronn. Not treason for me. Sandor Clegane's 2-handed sword rested at the back of Blaunt's neck. A weaker man might be unable to push the tip through the mail coif hanging from the helmet. The Hound would have no such problems. Sansa Stark stood behind Clegane, wearing a purple dress and a gray hood that hid most of her thick auburn hair. Clegane, these are orders from the king, Trant said. Then he can come here himself, Clegane said. The king ordered me to guard the girl so she comes to no harm. She won't be taken by 3 cocksuckers who can't swing a sword. King Joffrey will be greatly angered, Lancel managed to say. Joffrey is always angry. Northmen get angry as well. I hear they burn men alive and cut off the hands of their prisoners, Tyrion said. King Joffrey will crush the traitors, Trant announced. He certainly hasn't done a good job of it so far, Tyrion snarked. No doubt, when the Starks see you lead our men at the walls, they will quake in their boots. Lancel withdrew and the 2 white cloaks went with him. Bran sat down and oiled his sword. The servants brought Sansa hot bread, butter, and honey. A second plate was set out for Jane Poole, but the timid girl refused to venture to the Great Hall. Lady Sansa wrapped the food in a handkerchief. Clegane gobbled down bread and a hunk of cold chicken. Lord Tyrion, is there any more news from the Riverlands? The girl asked. The men returned from the battle, but not many of them. The stories differ as to how many were butchered in battle versus taken prisoner, Tyrion said. He refrained from saying more. There was no need to spread the wilder tales of sorcery and torture. Others already had done that. The girl kept her face impassive, smooth as steel. She left, the Hound trailing in her wake. Ron stood guard over her door. The sellsword had no intention of leaving the Stark girl. Tyrion entered the council chamber of Maegor's Holdfast. Bronn's spies informed him that his father had returned last night to King's Landing. He was surprised that Tyvier waited until the afternoon to summon them. His father was not a patient man in the best of times. Tywin sat behind a long table, with quill and parchment. Several letters were already written, waiting to be dispatched by messenger or raven. Father, Tyrion set down the chain of linked golden hands on the wood. Tywin ignored him and continued to write. Are you so pleased with my work that I am to remain the hand? You can return to Casterly Rock while I rule the 7 kingdoms. Tywin gave him a familiar glare. If I wanted a fool in motley, I would have summoned one. Well, perhaps Lancel would do. We do have other cousins and uncles, but the Starks enjoy their company too much to release them. Tyrion said, Varys has told me of the events of this morning. Lancel and Joffrey are both fools. His father handed over a letter written in a graceful, feminine hand. Tyrion read the words with shock, his mind reeling with the implications. Catelyn Stark has agreed to free Shamai, but why? I have promised through Baece that Sansa Stark is not to be harmed. Tywin said, This letter was written before the Battle of the God's Eye, Tyrion realized. Yes, Lady Stark feared that her eldest son would fall in battle. She freed Jaime to ensure that her daughter would not suffer if the Northern Army was defeated, Tywin said. Tyrion almost felt sorry for Lady Catelyn, but then the foolish woman had nearly gotten him killed at the Eyrie. Where is Jaime now? That is of no importance to you. Just know that Jaime is returning to King's Landing. Now we need to finish off the Starks, Tywin said. Finish off? They are winning. They slaughtered the army of the Reach, Tyrion said. Have you forgotten what I taught you? War is more than swords and spears. There is a tool for every task, and a task for every tool. Tywin said. He wondered whether his father had become ensnared by his own legend, the man who triumphed in the reigns of Castamere. The Starks were not the reign. These tools seemed to be failing. Everyone knows that Rosier Mose Bolton was your man. and now they realize traitors to the north are burnt at the stake. Bolton is not the only traitor in their army. Rivermen have never been loyal, Tywin said. Why not just return Lady Sansa and pay her guild? The sword ice, Ned Stark's bones. If the Starks want to freeze in the north, let them, Tyrion said. The wolves have made a mockery of the Lannister name. Our own houses refuse to follow us in battle. And what if the Starks should claim the throne? Tywin said. Through a Baratheon bastard apprenticed in the Street of Steel. Who would follow him? The Stormlanders are a prickly lot. Stannis is too proud to marry his daughter to a smith with small folk blood, Tyrion said. Knights of the Vale fought for the North in the last battle. What if they are joined by their fathers and brothers? Roose and Redford could declare for the Starks, and Jon Snow sent Amory Lorch to Dorne. The Martells will torture him into squealing, Tywin said. The murder of a Dornish princess and the royal children 16 years ago. Tyrion knew that terrible things were done for power, but the stain of those 3 deaths could not be washed from his father's hands. How do you expect to vanquish the Starks? They have won every battle, and if they should strike an alliance with Dorne or the Vale, we're fucked. With time and allies, Jon Snow and Robb Stark could take King's Landing, Tyrion said. Robb Stark and Jon Snow are better on the field, but there is more to war than fighting. We cannot defeat them in the open. We can attack from the shadows. A pack of wolves is hard to kill, but a lone wolf can be hunted down and skinned. Tywin said, finishing the 3rd Raven. The celebration for the dead had been long forgotten. News of the Kingslayer dominated the camp. Arya prayed to her gods that the old Tully Knight had lied, that her mother had not betrayed House Stark. She sought her brothers out, hiding her face under a gray wool cowl. The Kingslayer must have a golden cock. He sleeps with the queen, and now Lady Stark opens her legs for him, a knight with a black pitchfork on a golden bar. Sinister sneered. Shut your bloody mouth, hey, a Serwyn man said. Why should I? Why else would she free the Kingslayer? The man replied. He fucked her, and she let him go. The Tullys had been fucked by the Lannisters before. Maybe they like it. It's not true, Arya desperately hoped. They were telling lies, but the camp had turned angry and tense, and no one, not even the Tully men, raised their voice to defend her lady mother. The torches at the pavilion revealed dozens of armed guards standing a respectful distance away from Robb's command tent. They were all Stark men, and they carried spears and wore steel mail shirts and caps. There were no smiles on their faces. She found a spot next to Daisy Mormont's. Less than 10 northern lords had been allowed entrance and even fewer rivermen. A grim Sir Raybren stopped. A nervous Edmure from pacing. How did Sir Jaime go free? Roby asked Sir Robin Ryder. Lord Stark, we were traveling on the river road. Lady Catelyn wished to stay a night at the Inn of the Kneeling Man. Our men were happy for a hot meal and a warm bed. Her sworn sword guarded the Kingslayer that night. When we woke the next morning, the 2 were gone with horses. Lady Catelyn then told us that she released Sir Jaime. The bald knight said, Madness. Why would she do this? Wylis Manderly asks. For Lady Sansa. She says she was promised her daughter's safety, Ryder said. Did you search for them? Robb said. Ollis Mullen and I sent riders west on the road. We looked for hours, my lord, but found no trace. After a day, I rode south to alert you. Hollis wanted to search for longer, but we had not found any trail. No one saw them on the river road. I would swear that, Ryder said. The Inn of the Kneeling Man was 100 miles from River Run near Stonehenge. It was an odd place to release a captive who would have to ride far to reach the Crown Lands. Did Lady Stark receive a raven at the inn? Jon asked. The old knight stammered and hesitated. Answer the question, Sir Bobbin. Did she receive a raven? Yes, a raven was waiting for her at the inn. We thought it was a message from Lord Stark. I just sent you off to River Run. Why would I send a raven to an inn when I'm fighting a battle? Robb said. Did Lady Stark send a raven from the inn? Jon said. Sir Ryder gulped and nodded. And you did not inquire about these messages? Robb said. My lord, it is not for us to question our lady. She is Lord Hoster's eldest child and Lord Stark's wife. Hollis says he has followed her orders for 15 years without question. Rosier said. Arya doubted that Hollis Mullen would remain captain of the guards for House Stark any longer. I say we find the Kingslayer and take his head, Lord Karstark yelled. My lord, there was no trace of Sir Jaime. Our men searched for days, Ryger said. You had 20 men, I have 2,000. Karstark said, I will find him and send the Kingslayer back to Tywin in pieces. A son for a son, blood for blood. Robb ignored the outburst. Where is my lady mother now? Hallis is bringing her here, my lord. He should arrive in a day, Rhaegar said. Lord Karstark, you will wait until Lady Stark arrives. I wish to hear her reasons, Robb said. Gedmir Tully looked like he wanted to speak, but a cold glare from Karstark stopped him. Robb dismissed the other lords. Argyll would have left, but Ghost pressed his shaggy pale fur against her leg. She slipped into the corner and waited until only her brothers remained. How did you know about a raven? Robb said. If your mother intended to free Jaime, she would have done so at Harroway or near the inn at the crossroads. It would be far easier to escape to the Crown Lands from there. So something changed her mind. A message or an offer from the Lannisters? Jon explained. Can you find Sir Jaime? Robb asked. How? Jon asked. I am not a warlock who drinks shade of the evening and mumbles about his powers. No blue lips. Jon, you do know magic. You proved that at the Whispering Wood and at the Red Fork. And the wind at the God's Eye was unnatural, Robb said. There is magic, and there is magic. Seeing through the eyes of Ghost or a raven is a small thing. But Jaime Lannister was released 5 days ago. He could be 100 miles in any direction. Even if I were at the Inn of the Kneeling Man, it would be hard to find him. Jon sighed. Fine, brother. I will try. I will send Ghost and ravens north. But without any hint of his plans, it will be hard. If you were the Kingslayer, how would you escape the Riverlands? Robb said. I wouldn't escape. Your lady mother sent a raven from the inn. That means whoever made the offer received an answer. Bolton says there are others that will break faith with House Stark. They may send men to rescue Ser Jaime, or give him shelter, Jon said. Robb looked at a map of the Riverlands. The Inn of the Kneeling Man is between Stone Hedge and Raventree Hall, but the Brackens and the Blackwoods have fought bravely for us. It may not be them, but there are many, many river lords with holdfasts near the Trident. Tywin Lannister needs to only bribe one, and the Kingslayer could hide there until he is rescued. He wouldn't do that. Arya insisted. Why not? Roach said. Brienne is with him. Mother's sworn sword. She would insist that he go to King's Landing for Sansa's sake, Arya said. That assumes Brienne is still alive, Jon said to his sister's shock. Actually, Jaime Lannister is one of the most skilled warriors in the Seven Kingdoms. Why wouldn't he just kill Brienne and travel alone? I would. Why would Servier need her alive to return to King's Landing? But Brienne is a great fighter. She is big and strong, Arya said. Better than the Kingslayer? He almost defeated all my guards at the Whispering Wood. He was beating both Dacey and Eddard when Jon captured him, Robb said. Even if Brienne was skilled, she has to rest. She cannot kill him, but he can murder her in her sleep. He can use a rock or her sword. Jon said, Do you think Brienne is dead? Arya said. Jon shrugged. I do not know, but it is possible, even likely. Lady Catelyn put her in grave danger. Brienne will live only if the Kingslayer allows it. Tyrion Lannister enjoyed clever schemes, sharp wit, and a clever tongue, but only when he understood their meaning. Sadly, he was not certain what game Varys was playing that morning. The eunuch appeared at breakfast, with colorful saffron robes smelling of lavender and lilac. His soft white hands clutched the Tarashy honeyfinger like a spider playing with a fly. I am sorry, but Lady Sansa is indisposed, Tyrion said, finishing the savory kidney pie. Sandor Clegane barred the way to the Stark girl, as did bronze sellswords. Pity. I merely want to make certain of her health. She is, after all, quite important to your house, and death can be so sudden in King's Landing. Varys giggled and smiled. Tyrion lifted a goblet of wine to give himself time to think. Had the spider discovered his father's promises to Lady Catelyn? And was that a threat to Sansa Stark? If the North thought the Stark girl died due to the Lannisters, all hell would break loose. Surely no one would wish Lady Sansa harm. She is only a girl, Tyrion said. We all know how much Lannisters care about the health of children. Your bannermen are famous for it. Sir Emery Lorch sang quite the tale at Sunspear, until the Martells ripped his tongue out. The spider said sweetly, I had 10 name days at the sack of King's Landing, and I was 800 miles away at Casterly Rock. I do not know what happened at the Red Keep then, Tyrion said. You do not know because you do not care to ask. But Oberyn Martell does, and he was seen on Cape Wrath riding for King's Landing. Varys said, Tyrion did not wish to deal with this. The Red Viper hated the Lannisters and had a fearsome reputation for violence and unpredictability. Still, Oberyn Martell, given the past, was known to abhor the killing of children. He hoped that would be shield enough for his niece. Reyes, I know you like your little secrets, but I cannot spend the days eating honey fingers and kidney pies, or even drinking Arbor Gold. As Hand of the King, many important tasks require my attention. Tyrion pushed the plate away to dismiss the eunuch. Ah yes, you are the Hand. Varys chucked into the folds of his robes, and I am a member of the Small Council. I serve you at your pleasure, my lord, just as you serve the king. I am afraid these meetings require the utmost of secrecy, Tyrion said. The spider looked puzzled, although the tilt of his head and his eyebrow were exaggerated. Which meeting, my lord? The one with the black ears that you intend to send back to the Vale, or the summoning of the most devout at the great sept of Baelor? Tyrion gritted his teeth. He expected Varys to learn about his appointments, but only after they occurred. You may accompany me to see the High Septon this morning. The eunuch nodded, the smile reaching his eyes this time. I'd rather not. He is a fat pig who grows ever fatter on lampreys while the poor starve. My little birds tell me I am unwelcome at the Septon, and that the High Septon says that I am a heathen from Essos. Varys sighed. You are a heathen from Essos, Tyrion retorted. True. Better a heathen than a hypocrite. What do you want with the most devout? For them to spread the word that Snow is a sorcerer and an enemy of the faith, Tyrion said. Varys chuckled. The North follows the old gods. They will not care, but the Riverlords do not, and a proclamation from the most devout, that Jon Snow commits blasphemy and dabbles in dark magic, may drive men away from the Starks, Tyrion said. And back to the Lannisters? Only fools listen to the High Septon, but if you want him to bleat your song, you will need gold. He cares about blasphemy as much as you do, Varys said. The door opened and 2 giant men plowed forward in green cloaks edged with gold and satin. The lady in between them was tiny and white-haired, but the rich clothes and the pendant of a golden rose announced her quite clearly. A dozen green-cloaked spearmen followed, and several knights from the Reach. Lady Olenna, to see you again after so many years is a blessing. Varys simpered. Oh, shut up, Varys, the Queen of Thorns said. Ser Garland reached for his sword, and Tyrion realized the Tyrell men were heavily armed. We need to see Sansa Stark. The eunuch quirked his eyebrows. I have heard that she is indisposed. Olenna snorted and gazed at Tyrion. What do you need to speak to her about? He said. Business involving House Tyrell, Olenna said. I intend to keep the girls safe. I will not allow, Tyrion said. Olenna interrupted. Who will keep you safe, Lord Tyrion? By year's end, my granddaughter will be queen. My son will be Hand of the King. Where will you be? Tyrion tapped his fingers together. As a Lannister, he had his father's protection, but Lady Olenna was not Catelyn Stark. She would not strike openly, and the Tyrells were wealthy enough to pursue him to Essos. Before he could decide, Sandor Clegane moved aside. A calm Sansa Stark walked out and curtsied to the Tyrells. Lady Olenna, I would be happy to speak, the girl said. Sansa Stark asked the servants for pears, poached in wine, and a cheese plate. She calmed herself by filling a cup of sweet plum wine for Lady Olenna and Ser Garland. Clegane hovered near, and the hound glared at Olenna's twin 7-footers. Tyrion and the eunuch sat at the table, munching honey fingers. You know the results of the battle at the God's Eye, the tiny old woman said. Yes, my lady, I have heard stories from the servants. Sansa turned to Ser Garland. Sir, I am glad that my brothers did not take your head. I am glad too. I like my head and wish to keep it. The knight smiled ruefully. Olenna sighed, her years clearly showing. Your brothers captured many of our men. They intend to keep the very highborn as hostages, but have demanded a ransom for the other Reachmen. Snow has said he will kill them all if we do not pay. Sansa nodded. She was not surprised at those threats. The scullery maids at the Tower of the Hand gossiped about the capture of the Golden Tooth, of boys flung over walls, women starved for weeks, and children dragged from septs. They wondered if the wolves would come to King's Landing and murder them in their sleep.
Are these simply words? Or will House Stark massacre unarmed prisoners?
Olenna said. Robb would not, but I have not seen Jon since he left for the Citadel, Sansa said. But what do you think? Will Robb Stark allow this outrage by his brother? Olenna said, Outrage? My father's men and servants were slaughtered by the gold cloaks. Septa Mardane's head was mounted on a spike on top of the Red Keep. The Lannisters did not allow Stark guards to be ransomed, Sansa said. That was a different Lannister, Tyrion said uncomfortably. And a very stupid one. It would be better to have hostages. Olenna said, Lady Sansa, tell me the truth. Would your brothers kill prisoners? Butcher thousands of men after the battle? Perhaps Jon has the North in him, Sansa said. What does that mean? Tyrion asked. My father says the North is hard and cold and has no mercy. So yes, I believe Jon would kill your men. Why feed captives when they can be turned into gold? Sansa said. He sounds like a delight. Didn't Snow hang you from a gibbet? Varys snarked at Tyrion. The wolves set me free in exchange for Ned Stark and his daughters, Tyrion said. My father is dead and I am a prisoner here. I hope Jon finds you again, Lord Tyrion. I hope you learn how the North treats oathbreakers, Sansa said. He dreamt of dragons, not wolves. Ghost had run north to the River Road, and the ravens had flown last night to the Trident. But in his sleep, he only saw dragons. Aegon the Conqueror, Maegor the Cruel, Jaeya, Harris the Wise. He saw all the Aegons, the first of his name, the greedy one, the sad one, the whoremonger, and the unlikely. The Maesters claimed the Targaryens danced too close to the edge of madness. Perhaps they did. What did it mean for him? He saw his father, Rhaegar Targaryen. Long silver blonde hair, deep purple eyes, a red half-cloak over night black plate armor. The last dragon. Jon wondered, had Rhaegar triumphed at the Ruby Ford, how would his life have turned out? Would he have been embraced as a Targaryen prince, or shunned as his father's shame? Rhaegar had loved his mother. He was sure of that, but that love had been a sad story. Was I worth it, father? Your death at the Ruby Ford, my mother's death in Dorne, a bloody war, the murders of my brother and sister, and the end of a dynasty. Was I worth it? Jon wondered as he gazed upon his father and the kings of his house, stretching back for 300 years. You're a dragon, the shades whispered, and nothing matters more than the birth of a dragon. But that wasn't true, Jon thought. There were Targaryens that had not mattered. Babes who died within a few years. Girls married off for alliances. Even kings who had done little or died too quickly. There were princes who drank themselves to death and princesses who led lives of quiet misery. Only a few Targaryens had benefited the realm. Jon saw a vision of a castle on the foothills of reddish-streaked mountains. A towering fire had broken out, an inferno that consumed the pleasure palace of Summerhall. This is what happens when you attempt to birth dragons, he thought. His father had been born here amidst fire and grief. Aegon the Unlikely had died there, with his son and his friend, the two Duncans. They had failed, but what if they succeeded? What if the eggs hatched? Jon cleared his mind. He had no egg and no way to acquire a dragon. He had an army of Northmen over 1,000 miles away from home, too far to get reinforcements, and eager to return home after 6 moons. As for the River Lords, their lands had been pillaged and burnt. They might desire revenge, but they also needed to rebuild their holdfasts. He came upon Arya perched on a high rock, with Nymeria hovering like a protective den mother. The dark gray she-wolf was a head taller than her mistress and looked nearly as somber. Arya, looking to the north, searching for her mother's horse. Do you think they will punish her? She said, biting her lip. Robb is the one your mother betrayed, and Robb will be the one that has to render judgment, Jon said. But she was doing it for Sansa, Arya said. What would Ned Stark have done if a bannerman freed the Kingslayer? Jon said. Arya wrapped her arms about Nymeria's neck. She took great comfort in her dire wolf, just as Jon did with Ghost. Taking his head, her voice was slightly muffled in the gray fur, but she must have had her reasons. Nymeria accepted Jon's touch with no complaint as he patted his sister's arm. Everyone has reasons. That does not mean they are right. There was nothing more he could say. That afternoon, as the sun hung low in the cloudy sky over the cold steel of the God's Eye, a shamed Hallis Mullen led Catelyn Stark into the main tent. Bystanders gawked and whispered as the lady walked forward, a dire wolf pin on her heavy gray cloak. Her brother Edmure hastened to Catelyn's side, but the Blackfish stayed back. Only a single representative from each of the great houses of the north were allowed, along with Arya and Jon. "Lady Stark, did you release Sir Jaime Lannister?" Robb asked. He had put on the solemn stone face, but he lacked the hard-cold eyes of his father. "Yes, Lord Stark. At the Inn of the Kneeling Man," Catelyn said. "Why?" Robb demanded, his voice cutting through the silence of the tent. "They made promises about," she said. "Promises? More like lies. What are the words of Sovereign Cunts worth?" Karstark yelled. "Be quiet, Lord Karstark. My lady mother is speaking." "What promises?" Robb said. "Assurances for Sansa's safety, that no matter the outcome of the battle, she would not be harmed or mistreated. I feared for her life in King's Landing that she might be beaten, tortured, or abused," Catelyn said. "Who made the promises?" Jon asked. "There were three. Petyr Baelish vowed that he would protect Sansa and plead for her well-being to the Iron Throne. Sir Jaime Lannister swore on his honor as a knight that he would see Sansa return safe and unharmed. He would compel his brother and father to honor that pledge, and Lord Tywin," Catelyn said. "That was the Raven at the inn," Jon said. "Yes, Lord Tywin promised on the honor of House Lannister that Sansa would not be harmed if Jaime was freed. The Eddis claimed that Lord Tywin had sent ravens before to the inn," she said. "That last promise sealed Sir Toraime's release." Lady Stark believed that Tywin would keep his word, despite House Lannister's history of treachery. A whoremonger, an oathbreaker, and Tywin Lannister. "How can you trust any of them?" Rickard yelled in a red fury. "Varys has already lied to us. Jaime Lannister killed the king he swore to protect, and father would have never trusted Lord Tywin, not after the sack," Rhodes said. "Tywin Lannister may be ruthless, but he will honor his promise. He cares greatly about the Lannister name. He will not break his vow," Catelyn said. "My lords, my son Bran was crippled by the Lannisters. I do not wish to lose my oldest daughter." Rickard Karstark's face turned from an angry red to a grim cold stare. "That was far more worrisome than yelling. I had 3 sons, one is dead, another lost a hand, and the last, my heir, has not woken up for 6 days. What about my sons? While you plotted with the enemy, my sons fought the mountain." Lady Stark faced him calmly. "I grieve for your loss, Lord Rickard, but the Kingslayer's death would not bring back your children. His living may buy safety for Sansa. The Lannisters have played you for a fool, and you are a traitor to the North and to House Stark. My Torrhen deserved better. I want vengeance against the Lions. If I cannot have the mountain's head, I will return the Kingslayer to his Lord Father in 2 pieces." Rickard said, "The Kingslayer serves better as a captive. We do not want him dead. As our prisoner, his life protected Sansa, not the words of Baelish or Lord Tywin." Robb said, "She was still beaten bloody in front of the court, and trapped at the Tower of the Hand for the past moon. Who knows what Tyrion Lannister has done? He may want revenge against the Starks and hurt Sansa," Catelyn said. Revenge against her, Jon thought. It was Catelyn Stark who kidnapped Tyrion in a reckless flight of fancy. She made it worse by losing him at the Eyrie. Had she brought him to King's Landing when Robert Baratheon was alive, a trial would have stopped this entire war. Lord Karstark stood up and directed an icy, narrow voice to Robb. "My lord, what will you do? Your mother conspired with our enemies." The Great Jon crossed his huge arms together and stood in front of Lady Stark. "Leave off, Karstark. It was a mother's folly, a woman looking to protect a babe. Folly? I name it treason. My Torrhen is dead. While he fell in battle, the Kingslayer scurried back to King's Landing, thanks to Lady Stark. I demand justice for my sons." Karstark said. He stormed off, pushing through the Great Jon and Wireless Manderley. "Perhaps we can capture the Kingslayer before it is too late," Daisy said. "We do not know where he is. He could be anywhere," Jon said. Robb held his hand up. "My lords, I must speak to my lady mother, alone." Edmure hesitated, but the Blackfish pulled him away. Soon the tent only held the Starks and Jon Snow. Robb Stark placed both hands over his face. Only his thick red-brown hair could be seen. The vestiges of his Tully blood, Jon stood at his right side, waiting for his brother to speak. Arya stayed quite as well, refusing to meet her mother's eyes. "Rhubarb, I am sorry, Lady Catelyn started. "You betrayed me? Why?" Robb said in a flat voice. "For Sansa, I could not bear it if she was hurt," Catelyn said. "I know he was a valued prisoner, but Lord Tywin has promised Sansa's protection in return. His loss will cost us dearly. But it is more than the Kingslayer," Robb paced restlessly, his hands clasped together. "Why did you not trust me? Why did you not believe in me?" "But I do. The men respect you. You will be a good warden of the North," she said. "If you believed in me, the Kingslayer would be delivered to River Run. You thought I would lose the battle. You thought I would fail, Mother. That is why you freed him," Robb said. "I saw the Tyrell army with you at Bitterbridge. They had 50,000 swords, thousands and thousands of knights, and there were Lannister reinforcements as well," Catelyn said. "At Harrenhal, I told you that Jon and I have a strategy to defeat them. Why did you not believe me? I have won all my battles. I have not been beaten on the field," Robb cried. "They had so many more men, and Lord Toxley is a great soldier. I feared that Sansa would be killed, or worse. If you died, the Lancers would have her at their mercy," Catelyn said. "They still do." Secure Elydiaxley stood me have sworn to return her, but Baelish and Tywin did not. "Tywin only said that she should be safe, not freed," Jon said. "Jaime Lannister swore to compel his brother and father to release her," Catelyn said. "He is commander of the Kingsguard. What power does he have over his father?" Jon replied, "We all know who rules House Lannister. Tywin Lannister is our true enemy. Joffrey may have chopped off my father's head, but he would not dare to commit such an offense without Lannister swords and gold. You have humiliated me in front of my men. How can I lead an army when I cannot control my own mother? Who will trust me to lead them in battle?" Robb said. "It cannot be so bad. You won against Lord Tyrell. You have 100 highborn prisoners at River Run and captured many lords of the Reach. Tywin Lannister does not give a shit about the other prisoners. If they die, what does it matter? Jaime Lannister is his oldest son. He had more value than all the other prisoners combined. You know that. So does everyone else," Robb said. "I am sorry, Robb, but I did this for my love of Sansa. I am a Tully of River Run, and our words are family, duty, honor. I would sacrifice my duty and honor for my family," Catelyn said. Robb turned his back on his mother. "You did not sacrifice your honor and duty. You sacrificed mine. How can I command an army when I cannot control my own mother? Lord Karstark is right to be angry. He lost a son while Tywin Lannister gained his back." "I did not know about the Karstarks. You cannot blame me for that," Catelyn cried. "Men die in battle. If it wasn't Torrhen, it might have been the Small John or a Manderly brother. My father said that our bannermen are loyal to House Stark because we fight for them. How can we do so when we help our enemies?" Robb said. "Robb, Catelyn said. Robb raised his hand. "Leave me, Mother. You have done enough." They watched in silence as a wretched Lady Stark exited the tent. "I thought the battles would be the hard part. I did not think I would have to worry about my own mother," Robb said bitterly. "Karstark is furious, and I have no answer for him." He held his head in his hands and continued to pace. "You found no trace of the Kingslayer?" "None. The river is 150 miles away." "Serse Jaime may have taken the river road. He might be on a boat on the Red Fork. He may be hidden in a castle of a traitor. In 5 days, he could cover a great deal of distance. He may even have left the Riverlands," Jon said. Robb shook his head. "What can we do about the Kingslayer, Jon? How can we recover from this folly and make amends with Karstark?" "He lost a son. You will not make amends unless he has spilled Lannister blood," Jon replied. "You don't mean to allow him to kill our captives," Robb said, surprised. Jon shook his head. "The other captives hardly matter. He wants the Kingslayer or the mountain. Ser Jaime has been gone 5 days. That is enough time to flee the Riverlands, but not enough to get to King's Landing. We do not have much time. I say attack now, with all our forces. Burn Stokeworth and Roseby to the ground. Cut off Duskendale. Prepare to besiege King's Landing. Forget Jaime Lannister. Bring the war to the Crown Lands. We do not have the men to take King's Landing, not quickly, and we don't have the King's Slayer. If we starve the city, they may kill Sansa, Rhodes said. But what about the promises to protect her? Ori asked. Would you trust Tywin Lannister, the man who sacked King's Landing and ordered the rape and pillage of the Riverlands, the man who employs monsters like Clegane and Hoat? He may not know if the Kingslayer is safe, and even if he did, when has honor ever meant anything to the Lannisters? Robb said. I grant you that there is risk, and that are injured or not ready. But the time is now, before the Kingslayer returns to King's Landing. Nothing is certain in war. There is a tide in the affairs of men, which taken at the flood, can lead to victory. We need to remain on the attack. We need to press Tywin Lannister in the open, and not in the shadows, Jon said. We do not have enough men. Jon, combined, the Lannisters, Tyrells, and the city guards will be more than 20,000, and they are fighting behind walls. This is not Oxcross. They will see us coming and be able to prepare, Robb said. It would be better to have more soldiers, and if our injured could recover. But the only thing that matters is to fight at the right place and the right time. The right place is King's Landing, so we can force Tywin into the field. The right time is now, Jon said. And Karstark, Robb said. Punish Lady Stark harshly. After that, send the Karstarks into the Crownlands to hunt the mountain. Better he kill our enemies than lurch about the Riverlands, Jon said. She is my mother, Jon. I cannot punish her severely. I can send her back to Winterfell or keep her locked away at River Run. She is my blood, Rhodes said. Robb, you are not a Tully. You are a Stark. You were raised to rule the North. We have to defeat the Lannisters. We lose, we die, and so does the North, Jon said. I cannot risk Sansa's life, and what sentence can I give my mother? I will not send her to the Silent Sisters, Robb said. Why not? Lady Catelyn does not need to swear a vow of silence, but she should be banished from your side. If we win the war, welcome her back. Of course, Stark will not care if we win and the mountain is slain, Jon said. You don't understand, Jon. You don't have a mother. If you did, you would not send her away to a septon. I will not shame her, Robb said. An icy silence fell over the tent as her brothers glared at each other. You are right, Lord Stark. I don't have a mother. Jon turned and walked away. Arya did not know who was in the right. She could not blame Robb for protecting their mother. But Jon's advice seemed right. Her mother had made a serious error, and the North would remember how the Kingslayer had been freed and who had freed him. The birds sang sweetly, and the muddy red river flowed beneath the boat as the triangular sails picked up a strong east wind, blowing them into sight of the pink stone walls of the harbor. Leinster Gold had paid for the impassive captain who managed the sails and tillers of the small cog. The old seaman was quiet, speaking to the two passengers only on the few occasions that he needed a second or third hand for reefings, shifting the ballast and tacking. He does not wish to know our names, Jaime Lannister realized. Profit mattered more to Bravacy than stories. Jaime laughed out loud as the sun tickled the gray whiskers on his face. He had kept his full scraggly beard, grown over the last 4 moons, but hacked his long golden locks short. With the homespun brown cowl and robe, he could pass for a begging brother. That could not be said for his companion, well over 6 feet tall with broader shoulders than the Clegane brothers. She insisted on wearing dented plate mail on board, despite the captain's sour looks. You have to keep out of sight, Brienne hissed. The deep blue cobalt of the armor peeked out of the drab brown cloak, and a quartered sun and moon was displayed on the pauldrons. No one will notice me, wench, Jaime said. They will stare at you, Brienne blushed. Knights wear armor, the Riverlands may be peaceful, but fighting men are still needed. You are not a man, wench, and we are nearly out of the Riverlands. The walled town of Maidenpool could be seen to the south. They had crossed the Quiet Isle hours ago, and the red water of the Trident had been replaced by blue. Tyrion would know where the Bay of Crabs began and the Trident ended. Yakme barely cared. He only wanted to return to King's Landing. You will have to hide below deck, Brienne said. The cog pulled closer to the harbor, and Jaime could see the great stone bathhouse where good Queen Alysanne had almost died. He began to sing Six Maids in a Pool, a ditty about Jonquil and her sisters bathing while Florian the Fool watched. What are you doing? We don't want any attention, she said. Rather late for that. Jaime said. Armed men wearing a red fish on white waited at the docks. They carried spears and wore helms with fish crests. But these were not tally guards wearing trouts. A pale, whiskered man stepped forth. He looked soft and tired, and his fancy, ornate armor could not hide a fleshy, flabby body. Brienne drew her sword, attempting to block any entry on the gangplank. Jaime snorted and flipped down his cowl. The wench might be strong and skilled with the sword, but she knew little about the world. There were at least 8 guards, and no way for the ship to escape. Sir Jaime Lannister, the fleshy man with the red salmon sigil, asked. Jaime nodded. I am Lord William Mooton. Welcome to Maidenpool. He sat on a gilded chair, overlooking the town walls and the rutted road that led to Duskendale. The Raven said that men from Hollard Castle would arrive in a day's time to escort him south. Jaime drank the broth of the thick mutton soup, avoiding the onions and the beets. The food had been brought by only a lone guardsman, and those Jaime judged as the oldest of the ones at the docks. Clearly Lord Mooton wanted no servants to learn his identity. Go back to Riverrun, wench. I will not need you on the road to King's Landing. Jaime said, I swore to return Lady Sansa to her mother, no matter what the danger. I made a sacred vow, and I will keep it. Brienne looked warily around the room, full of gilded wood, rich red velvet, and fine woven tapestries. A bright blue Tyroshi tricorn hat rested on a pale gold pillow near the window. Lord Mooton's solar was more garish than a whorehouse. There is no danger. Mooton wants us to leave, so does my father, Jaime said flippantly. We should go bathe in Jonquil's pool. I will wash your back if you wash mine. Brienne glared at him with disgust. I don't understand. Why is Lord Mooton helping you escape? The Starks freed Maidenpool. They saved House Mooton from your father's forces. So why would Lord Mooton help the Lannisters? Simple. He is a coward. Why are you helping me escape? Jaime said, I am pledged to Lady Stark, Brienne said. Lady Stark betrayed her son for the same reason that Lord Mooton does. Fear. Mooton has a girl of 13 name days, 2 boys who are squires, and some younger babes. He hides them from us, but I saw their faces in the windows. Jaime said, So, Brienne asked, what do you think my father will do to them? Jaime waited a moment. If Mooton betrayed me, his daughters would be raped and his sons tortured. Maidenpool is not far from King's Landing on the Duskendale Road. He might give the girls to Gregor Clegane. As for the boys, they would be lucky to die quickly. Mooton knows that his house can end in a flash. But, the Starks are winning the war, Brienne said. The Starks have honor. They would not rape young girls. My father does not have such limits. Why do you think he uses the mountain? Sir Gregor has married 3 times. All the girls died within 6 months. What do you think the mountain does to them before they die? He smashed a baby's head against the wall and raped his mother with Aegon's blood still on his hands. Lord Mooton has bent the knee. After the war, a Lannister will sit on the Iron Throne. My father will be Hand. My sister will be Queen Regent. And the Starks will be 1,000 miles away. How can your father allow such a thing? Knights and lords are sworn to protect the weak, Brienne said. You are a greater fool than Lady Stark if you believe that. My father cares about one thing. The Lannister name, not his Bairnmen, not his children. He wants our family name to be feared and respected. And if raping girls and killing children will do it, then so be it. He would put Maidenpool to the torch just like the Riverlands. My father is a butcher. Robb Stark is not. He does not have the stomach for it. Jaime said. Better to be Lord Robb than your father, then. Brienne said. You think so, wench? Then why are you helping Tywin Lannister? You are working against Robb Stark by bringing me to King's Landing. Jaime said. I am serving Lady Catelyn, Brienne retorted. Jaime snorted. And if Lady Stark asked you to stab her son in the back, or bring her Jon Snow's head, would you do that? Lady Stark is a fool, and so are you. You are helping my father win, and Tywin Lannister always wins. The camp was quiet when Jon woke. He had dreamt of dragons again, flying over an ugly square of a city, miles and miles of cramped, shabby structures. The roads were broad and lined with trees, but the inns, stalls, graveyards, taverns, and tanneries huddled together like orphans begging in front of the great red keep, Aegon's city. Rhaegar's city, not mine, Jon thought. I have never been there. The smell of blood and fire was heavy in the air, or was that still the dream? At night, the wind blew from the fields to the lake, and despite the best efforts of the army and the prisoners, there were still bodies to be buried. In a week, they will all be buried, and even the unknown soldiers would be burnt to ashes and placed 6 feet below. A gloomy half-light filled his tent. Jon did not feel the chill. He had thrown off the blankets last night, even without the presence of Ghost. He washed his face in the cool water of the basin, and donned his clothes. He strapped a blade to his belt, but wore only boiled leather. He didn't even need that. Eddard Karstark, Dacy Mormont, and Wendell Manderly guarded him during the day. The youngest Karstark strapped a thick shield to his maimed left arm, and could still fight well with a heavy axe. Not as quick, but Northmen were tough. The sun had not risen high enough to burn off the gray fog. Jon walked to the God's Eye and to the quays and posts that dotted the shore. Even through the fog, he could see the boats bobbing on the water, and the arms and buckets of the catapults and siege machines sticking into the air, ready to unleash a forest of missiles. "Me lord," Jon acknowledged the bows and waved them back to work. The small folk and villagers had spent the last few days cutting down timber, fitting masts and sails, and building more ballista. These were small machines suited for quick boats that could sail down the Blackwater. The stones and bolts were not strong enough to damage city walls. He would need to build larger weapons for that if the army ever got closer to King's Landing. The cogs, carracks, and galleys docked on the God's Eye were not the Iron Fleet. Even the stoutest Byreme had only a dozen pairs of oars, but Jon could still use the ships. He could sail them down the blue-green river to the Blackwater Rush. He could supply his forces from the river and transport men quickly to attack the Crown Lands. The source of the Mander was only 50 miles from the Blackwater. The upper reaches of the great river were muddy but rough, but rafts and skiffs could sail into the heart of the reach. He might even reach Cider Hall before the Tyrells were aware of the invasion. Before the Targaryens came, the Ironborn had used the rivers to terrorize their enemies. He could do the same, but he did not control the Northern Army. Robb commanded the troops. He had vowed to stand by his brother's side in war. "I will not betray Robb," Jon thought. "He is my liege lord." The voice inside whispered that was a lie. "Robb Stark may have been Warden of the North and head of House Stark, but you are the king, the blood of the dragon. You were born to rule, to restore Targaryen rule, and exact retribution for his dead brother and sister. Fire and blood." Those were the words of his house. Fire and blood. He sensed the wolf before he saw anything through the fog. Then again, Nymeria was taller and broader than his sister. Arya handed over half a loaf of warm bread with a dollop of honey. "Are you still angry at Robb?" she asked. Jon took a bite. The bread was delicious, like most of Hot Pie's baking. "I am not angry." "You are a terrible liar," Arya said. He chuckled. "I suppose I am. I have never been good at trickery or hiding my thoughts." He was not ghost silent as the grave. "You think Robb is wrong for waiting and not attacking?" Yair said. "There comes a time in every battle and every war where both sides are exhausted and consider themselves weak or beaten. He who continues the attack wins," Jon said. "Or she could win as well," Arya said stubbornly. Jon nodded. "Or she. Our war with the Lannisters has not ended. We need to continue fighting. Negotiating or trusting Tywin Lannister or Joffrey Baratheon is a dangerous game. I want to kill all of them. Tywin, Cersei, Joffrey, Trant, Alan Payne. The entire Kingsguard. Everyone who has made our family suffer," Arya said. "They are all at King's Landing, sister, and that is where I wish to go," Jon said. Late that morning, when the sun had burned away the fog, Jon and Arya stood in the tent with the other lords. He kept his eyes on Lord Karstark. Even with Eddard's recovery, Karstark was gaunt and wild-eyed. His long gray beard unkempt. He stared at Catelyn with something worse than anger. Contempt. The Lord of Karstald felt only contempt for Lady Stark. Robb sat in the middle next to his Lady Mother. That felt wrong. Catelyn Stark should be lower. She needed to show more remorse than a bowed head. "My Lady Mother has confessed to freeing Serta, Jaime Lannister. She did so to ensure the safety of my sister Sansa Stark. For her punishment, I send her back to Riverrun under guard, and she will remain in the Wheel Tower." Robb announced. "Is that it, Lord Stark? Is that your justice?" Karstark asked. "She will be imprisoned in the tower. She will not give any counsel for the war," Robb said. Karstark spat on the floor. You mean she will not be allowed to betray the North further? Lord Rickard, I know you are wroth. I would make amends, Catelyn said. If you were a man who freed Jaime Lannister, I would challenge you to a duel. Instead, my men will hunt for the Kingslayer. We will search for him in the Riverlands. We will find him and kill him. Rickard grunted. My lord, the army must stay together. We cannot allow our hosts to separate, Robb said. If it is not treason to free Lannisters, how can it be treason to hunt them down? Surely you want prisoners, Lord Stark. Or do you mean to send me to my room as well? Lord Stark stood up and walked out. Outside, Karstark cavalry had already saddled their horses, ready to ride, and Karstark infantry formed lines, their tents packed last night. Robbie had just lost 2,000 men. A remorseful Eddard turned his face away and joined his Lord Father. Fools. They were heading in the wrong direction. Jon was certain that they needed to march south.